gonna stop.
I don't know.
Did that ever work?
Anna's hair was cool. I don't think I've seen you, but I know. I mean, it's only been a month. How different?
I know, they're
Fighting.
I hear this plain sight, but
I know. You're tweeting.
sorry you just looked up.
What I had the greens
Okay. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. This is the work session for July 21, 2025. First item is the minutes, review of the minutes from June 23, 2025. Anybody had any comments about those? Okay, we're going to go a little bit out of order, and Frosty Marriott is not coming, so that discussion item's going away. We have a new discussion item that was too late for the agenda, and it's Carroll Electric, it's Mike Dodge and Josh Kapp. We're going to have them go first.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
You want me to use the microphone or just?
Either way.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll kind of stand off to the side, but thanks again for having us. What we've got to present to you today is probably a wide range of topics. We just like to kind of get you up to speed of what's going on in Bella Vista as far as Care Electric is concerned, but really it's scaled way down. I mean, we could talk pretty much probably for an hour on each individual topic, so we'll be very mindful of your time. I know you've got a lot to talk about tonight, but again, my name is Mike Dodge. I'm the VP of Northwest Arkansas. I'm here in Bentonville. I've got with me Josh Kapps. He's our manager of field services and operations support. He works over in our engineering department in Berryville. We'll just kind of go from there. Really, we're going to try to approach this from these three categories: reliability, affordability, and local, what's going on locally here. But before we get into these three, always paramount above anything we do is our safety. We wanted to touch on this and just give you a glimpse of what it looks like from Care Electric. And again, we can talk for an hour on this, but we'll keep it as brief as possible. But we have an extremely extensive safety program when it comes to our linemen and rights of way personnel, as well as all of our internal personnel. A very critical, I mean, you can obviously understand with us working around high voltage electricity, the need for that, but we do also get to the community. And some of that outreach includes our high voltage demonstration. These photos here are taken where we've done high voltage demonstrations at various police departments, fire departments, different community events, schools, things of that nature. And this high voltage demonstration trailer is exactly what it is. I mean, we can plug it into just a regular 240 volt and step up the voltage to high voltage, and we can really demonstrate what can happen when it's not treated properly. So it's a really good tool for us to use in our community outreaches. Like I said, our school presentations with the high voltage trailer, we also do magic shows, safety town, things of that nature. The kids get a pretty good kick out of those things, especially the magic shows. They seem to be a big hit with them. This is something relatively new, but easement encroachment violations and our safety violation programs, really we've got to look at mostly on our side of the system. It's the National Electric Safety Code that talks about, you know, different clearances and things like that we can be over building signs, structures, things of that nature. More so on the members' side, it's going to be the National Electric Code where that takes place, but we look at both of it within our vision or our line of sight. I mean, if we see violations that are going to be a harm to the public, We're going to raise a flag, we're going to contact them, we're going to work with them to try to get that rectified. And then this is probably one of our newest topics. It's vegetation management. We call it hot spotting, but it's really approaching trees that are considered cycle busters. Our cycle is generally a 6-year cycle between re-clearing operations, and there's some trees within that 6-year span that could grow within the power lines and perhaps cause some issues. That picture is not taken in Care Electric's territory, thankfully. Just wanted to make that clear right away. But if you squint your eyes really closely at this state, actually national map here, you can see that Benton County and Washington County are in the high-risk areas. We've got to take that pretty seriously. This map was put out by FEMA, and then we've also got a lot of national and state regulations that we've got to go by in order to make sure that our rights of way are up to the regulations and standards that they're requiring. That's just a kind of a glimpse, at least, into that particular initiative. As we move to reliability, if I can get this to, there we go. Liability is certainly a big topic for us as we want to make sure that people have power when they need it. This is a chart, it's kind of a busy chart, but the left side is going to be an annual bar for each year showing our performance for all events, and then they're grouped together over here, normal events. All events is going to include all of our major storms and things like that. The normal events are going to have those major storms carved out of it, so it's more of our controllable type of scenarios where we can do more about it, perhaps. You can see, over the last 13 years, we've broken our record 11 times. Kind of trailed off here the last couple of years. We're not very happy about that, but we definitely take this initiative very seriously. And this is tied to public safety too, when you think about people needing power under extreme situations. Winter Storm Uri, certainly that was a big issue when we heard the headlines coming out of Texas about people not having power during a time when it was extremely cold. We certainly made it through that, mostly unscathed. We had a few issues here and there, but our system held up very well during that, and we're very proud of that. But that doesn't say that we're not, I guess, vulnerable to things going forward. Mostly, we're a customer of the grid, so to speak, ourselves, because we buy power from the bulk grid and we deliver it to you all. So we need to make sure that that grid is very robust. We'll get into that a little bit later, but that's really the key thing, is making sure our system is as good as it can be, so when we get that power delivered to us, we can deliver it to everybody else. Just another chart showing very similar things, but the key point on this, actually, let me explain the chart a little bit. All events is going to be the blue line, normal events, and then normal events excluding all weather events are the green and gray, respectively. You can see what happened to our reliability during last year's tornadoes. And then you go back to, I think it's 2019, we also had a tornado that cut across the south part of the county, went from Salem Springs all the way up to Blue Isle, I believe is where that tornado traveled. And then we had some other windstorms actually here in Bella Vista in the 2017 timeframe. So those are the blips that you see on that, and that, and certainly weather events can cause issues for that. But really, I mean, as much training as we put into our linemen and trying to be responsive to outages, we'd like to focus on trying to keep the outages from occurring in the first place. That'd be the better scenario. And so that's where vegetation management comes in. On our website, you can see these list of things here as far as what it means to us as far as vegetation management. We already talked about increased public safety. We saw the tree burning and things like that. Higher reliability, that's obvious. When we look at every one of our causes for outages, you've got, well, trees are certainly one of them. Trees in and out of the right of way are certainly a major cause. Small animals, squirrels, birds, things like that. We've got wildlife protection that we put on our system to try to try to mitigate that. Public accident, people hitting structures or dig-ins, things like that are going to be causing issues. But really the number one thing every year is always goes back to a vegetation-related cause. And so our focus on vegetation management in the last 10 plus years has really ramped up. So we do a very strong focus on that. But working our way down that list, lower costs, you can kind of couple that with increased energy efficiency down the list. But when trees touch the power line, they're stealing power from the system. And as a cooperative, we all buy that power from the bulk grid, and then we expect to sell it through meters on the other end. Well, if the tree is stealing that power in the middle, then that's obviously going to lose revenue and be inefficient for the system. So that's where those come in. The other ones I want to kind of focus on, improving environmental habitat. You might wonder, well, how in the world do you do that with vegetation management? But really, when you think about the plan that we've adopted, it's not Carroll Electric's plan alone. Josh Katz actually can probably speak to this, but he's done extensive research to make sure we're looking across the entire industry to make sure we've got best practices to see what we're doing is the best that it can be. And that kind of comes into this particular initiative. We are apologize for that. We are a Tree Line USA utility, which is sponsored by, or actually created by, the Arbor Day Foundation. And that's no small task, and we'll touch a little bit on that, but I don't know if Josh has any more to add to that.
Sure, for us to become certified as a tree line utility, it took us about 5 years of research and improving our own product in the field. Incorporating an integrated vegetation management where it's using a combination between mechanical clearing and use of herbicides to compensate the mechanical clearing so that we can satisfy one of the requirements for this. Some of it is educating our members, some of it is educating our own in-house employees. One of the steps that we made, we have now been recognized for the past 11 years, but one of the steps we made early on was to promote within our own vegetation program certified arborists. So we started migrating that way, and at one point we had up to 13, almost 14 licensed arborists that work at Carroll Electric. I believe we're due to retirement and things of that nature. We're down to, I believe it's 11 certified arborists in-house today. Those arborists meet with the members throughout the corridors to visit with them, to show them and try to educate them on what is the best practices when it comes to trimming trees, when it comes to cutting and removing vegetation. Not always is trimming the best. Sometimes removal is the best. And those arborists can look at that tree and tell you where defects are at in that tree and what's best for that particular tree and how best to maintain it. So,
like Josh said, it was that 5-year program to try to really get this launched. We had to reach out to our communities, and we received letters of recommendation. This is just a few of them here from some of our most tree densely populated areas that included Bella Vista, Jasper, Huntsville. Getting those folks to offer that recommendation to say, yeah, Carroll Electric worked with us to try to promote what Josh just spoke on. With that, Carroll Electric is the only Tree Line USA utility in the state of Arkansas. And we're one of 143 across the country. So when we say it's not that easy to obtain, it certainly isn't, and we're a very, very small company when you're talking about this initiative. Here's a photo of recently cut to a re-cleared power line. We understand that it will have initial visual impact. I mean, we can't get around that. I mean, when we're going to cut trees, it's going to look pretty close to this. But really, our ultimate long goal is trying to get our rights of way to look like this. You can see the grass or natural weed floor. The trees are now getting, to a growth on the edge to where we're not having to really heavily maintain that. But that includes the entire integrated vegetation management plan that Josh spoke on. So if we can get all of our rights of way to look like this, the impact on the environment, and that's what we're talking about, ultimately is better because we're not even having to roll as much mechanical equipment on there as well as putting any herbicide products on there to get any of the woody vegetation out from under the line. We'll shift and get into affordable and kind of work our way real quickly to local, but we're very proud of this. Carroll Electric works extremely hard to keep our rates as affordable as possible. We're one of the lowest in the state and on average, compared to the rest of the country. People living in Bella Vista and the rest of Northwest Arkansas and Carroll Electric is going to have a 25% lower electric rate than they would if they went anywhere on average in the country. Certainly, there's some little pockets here and there that can be found that are more affordable, but in overall, Carroll Electric is very affordable. But like I said, talking about the grid, many of those that are Carroll Electric members, actually everyone that is a Carroll Electric member would have received this letter back in, I believe it's March. This was an initiative right after Winter Storm Uri occurred, and we said we got to really do something about it to educate our members on what's happening with the bulk grid, because we're getting to a point where, unfortunately, but it's the truth, where if the grid becomes unstable, there's nothing else that they can do once they go through certain steps of trying to mitigate that instability. The last resort is rolling ground blackouts. We got really close in that winter storm Uri for Carroll Electric to do that. But you can see that center of that state. We're in that orange and red area, some of the high-risk areas. And this is a report put out by NERC, which is a national organization. And they do studies on the grid nationally. They say, hey, what's going on? What is the expected load? And what is the expected generation? If it doesn't match at certain levels, they're going to put these certain warnings out there. So really, we need to have something good to plug in on this end so we can deliver on your end. And Bella Vista is growing, certainly. This is really just probably something that you've seen very much from Taylor as far as her reporting building permits. These numbers aren't going to match exactly with what she has because we lag a little bit as far as when our system is actually plugged in a zip code. But each one of these bars, the blue bar is going to be, I believe, is the west side of Bella Vista, the 72714 zip code, and the orange bars are the east. Sorry, yeah, flipped. I'm turned in the wrong direction, so yeah, thank you. We're flipped. So, yeah, you can definitely see the west side, as you know, is outpacing the east side as far as new growth. But to keep up with that growth, and we'll end on this slide and then take questions from you. But I just wanted to take a step back in time a little bit and show you, back in before 1969, we didn't have a substation or a transmission line serving any of Bella Vista. So we built our first transmission line and our first substation. It's the one on Pinion Creek Road, right there by the recycling center. That's that substation right there. Then quite a while later, over a decade later, we needed an Ashdown substation. That's over there, Grosvenor Road. And we looped the transmission system. So looping that transmission system is a good thing for redundancy to improve the reliability for the area. Then we built Highland Substation. That's the one right across the street here. Elvin Don came in underneath that transmission line, and that's kind of Chelsea, Cunningham kind of area. Elvin Don Road comes off of Chelsea right there, and that's where that substation is. And then we had to go out in 2008, further out west as growth was happening, and we built Canic. That's all the way on the far edge of Bella Vista, out towards the bypass there.
Is that the one that's off of Highland?
Yes, Highlands and Glasgow, I think, kind of meet just a little bit north of there. Yeah. And then just a couple years after that, we looped the system then from Highlands to Elwindon. And that's the system that you see today. When you underlay all of our, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to talk to you about some improvements that we have coming. So right here, you can see we have 3 supply points into Bella Vista. One coming over there just a little bit underneath Highlands, the other one coming in underneath Elwindon, and then the other one over here by Ashdown. We've got another one planned that's going to come into Canic to give us an additional supply point into Bella Vista. That's going to be a huge improvement over there. That'll also be a 69 kV line. But longer term, we've got another plan for over here on the east side, a 161 line. That's more than double that 69's capacity. So we're going to almost triple the capacity that's in Bella Vista today by doing those additional supply points. So that's a huge improvement that we have to meet the growing demands in Bella Vista. Now we'll underlay all of the distribution so you can kind of see. So pretty much where every road is in Bella Vista would pretty much have a power line. There's a few exceptions, but that's pretty much your roadmap also for Bella Vista. But you can also see, if you put a radius around each one of those black substations, about a 2-mile radius, that's about how far each one of those substations can serve. So you can see we definitely are probably going to need something in the northwest, and perhaps maybe something in the southeast. I mean, it's just a matter of the load growth. We have to do it. We've got to get transmission and substation over to serve those people so we can connect that distribution network into that new substation. We'll end on this. System stats. So there's over 17,500 active accounts. This is a couple months old. But that's pretty close to what we have today. Over 21,000 poles, 591 miles of overhead distribution line just in Bella Vista alone, and then over 18 miles of overhead transmission line in Bella Vista to retain. So all of that is definitely it's a system we're proud of that we can rely on to deliver the power that's needed for Bella Vista. But it's certainly, we know we need to improve on that, and we're going to continue to do that for the future. That leaves us with all of that. That pretty much ends our presentation. If any questions, I'd certainly entertain those if you have them.
I had a question. Early on in your presentation, you showed a map, and you had Benton, Washington County, and it indicated they were high-risk areas.
Yes.
And was that referring
That's
to the...
according to fire hazards as they relate to tree density.
Okay.
Yes, I can share that map with you, but it comes from the FEMA website.
I always wondered if the foliage spraying was connected to what happened in California, where the power company got blamed for the fires.
Interesting. I haven't heard that. I mean, we've certainly seen a lot of these regulations we talked about coming down from FERC. Were probably more related to like the blackouts in 2003 that we saw. That was blamed on inadequate tree trimming, and so the trees touched the power lines and then caused the blackouts at that time. And then I don't know exactly what caused the outage or the fires in California. I can't speak to that, so I'm not even going to speculate on that. Unless, Josh, if you prefer.
Most of what we see is between power lines and vegetation interaction is from the borders growing in on it. It is rare to see the power line get down into the vegetation. The vegetation has been killed. It obviously can grow up through it if it's green and still growing. One of the things that we did change in developing our integrated vegetation program is to try to apply the use of herbicides shortly after the reclearing cycle takes place, so that when you're applying that, it is a full year application. You have to let the leaves come on. You can't spray it on a stick and expect it to have the same effect that it would have once the leaves come out on it. So you have to let that take place. But if you do it 1 to 2 years after the reclearing cycle, you're talking about vegetation that is about waist high. We've got way bigger issues if we're having power line interactions with vegetation that's waist high. There's a much greater concern with safety to the public in that case. So that's, we would not try to spray it if it's up in the lines. We would look at other alternatives. We would try to re-clear it to get it to a more manageable height before applying the herbicide.
And
So
you made a good point as far as, when we spray. That was actually modified after we had meetings like we did with the city and the POA at the time. This was back in probably 2000.
17 or 9.
Yeah, I think it was. I think Mayor Frank Anderson was mayor at the time. We had both the POA and the council together, and certainly, that was when we were spraying when the trees were more mature, and so we realized, hey, this is certainly a better program, and Josh's research confirmed, yeah, let's get it when it's much lower. It's a lot better overall. Yeah.
Do you have a timeline for the new 2 substations? Because I know our residents don't like it when we cut trees or when they don't have power, so it's a double-edged sword. But
Okay.
when can we expect to?
Goodness.
the new substations?
New substations, I think, that we referred to in the northwest,
Okay.
and then the southeast. Cunningham, we've got, certainly that property is being used to help store some of the structures for transmission line. Getting Cunningham, I can't remember the time frame unless you know.
What usually ticks that over is load. So when a substation starts getting loaded to about 80% capacity, we have to start looking for another place to land another power point. You don't want to get up to the 100, 120, 130% capacity on that power transformer. One of the reasons is the power transformer alone in any given substations is about $1.5 million to replace. The second reason, it takes about 2 years to get it replaced. If we ordered one today, we're looking at a 2-year lead time and $1.5 million. So to try to come up with a compensation plan of bringing in a mobile is not efficient at all. So whenever a sub hits 70, 80% capacity, we start looking at those landing spots. We'll start speculating on where that load's going to go. We have a pretty good pulse on most of the developments that's coming in because naturally they have to apply for power before they can get it and receive it. So we have a small vision into the future, a short vision, if you will, into the future of where those load growth and those pockets are going to be. But yeah, it's based on our current infrastructure and the capacity remaining in our current infrastructure to determine where those are at. As far as giving you a timeline today, I don't know.
I certainly, we can follow up on that, but I definitely believe it's less than 2 years that's coming. It's probably going to be closer to around that year time, because if you ask our engineers, I know that they, and of course Josh and I'm engineer by background, and I know Josh, he's a civil engineer under a different set of responsibilities, but our substation engineers, they would probably have wanted it yesterday. They always want a little bit more of a cushion. But we can follow up on that, certainly.
So the new additional service that's being planned for the east side, where you go from 69 kV up to 169, will that require an upgrade of the line, or will it require a duplicate to bring the power?
We will have to upgrade the line going all the way back to the supply point down in Boca. So yeah, all of the insulators along that line are now insulated only at 69,000 kV. So when you have to insulate at 161, those insulators will be twice as long.
So will the cable remain the same size?
The cable can, I don't know if we're going to remain, but what happens when you increase the voltage, your current reduces, and so then your voltage dropping. But yep, absolutely. But a lot of times we'll look at the condition of the conductor and we'll probably be replacing. We do have a standard transmission line conductor size. If that's not already at that, we'll be replacing conductors as well.
And the fact that you're bringing it into one substation that we have existing, will that mean that downstream from that, where that feeds through?
That 161 will actually come in at the Cunningham location that's not on that road. So.
I just want to say thanks for coming and thanks for all the proactive work that you do to manage our power supply. A lot of folks in Bella Vista are older. Almost all the houses are all electric, as you know, so we're really vulnerable and we're really dependent on you doing your job well, and I just really appreciate all the proactive work.
Thank you.
And you're really responsive when we have a tree down in the neighborhood to restore power.
That's good to know.
Could I, I'm a lawyer, so I don't have a stake in this, but I do have, it comes up a lot.
Okay.
And so, we have a lot of people that love high-speed internet. And internet over power lines is something that is an option in other places. And it's not anything that we know Carroll has done in the past. Is there any way that Carroll would look at, maybe cooperating with Ozarks Electric or getting into that field at all?
Okay, let me back up and just say Carroll Electric looked at that ourselves.
Okay.
It would not be going over our power lines. Obviously, we'd have to run fiber along our poles. Communications on the power lines, we use that. It's very slow, but it's just for meter reading and it's very, very low bandwidth. But certainly we'd have to string fiber. We looked at that twice, and it just was not feasible for Carroll Electric to be able to get that done. And so we have tried to partner with whether it's, any of the other communications companies, Cox or AT&T or CenturyTel, or there's a lot of others, throughout our territory. Trying to figure out, hey, if we work out a certain deal, would you be willing to get to everybody? That includes everybody up in northwest of Sulphur Springs and southeast of Jasper. And certainly that had some challenges, and I'm not sure if that was something they were ready to tackle just yet. But we do have joint use agreements with all of the communication companies around here. And so we just have to make sure that we have adequate clearance between our lines. And so when that make-ready work has to occur, they can work that out with us. But yeah, so we kind of do. Certainly we've had that question posed on us where we might be the only person that could do it in any community. Luckily here in Bella Vista, we've got Cox or AT&T that could perhaps provide some of that. And then certainly Ozarks could come up and do that, absolutely. So we'd be willing to work with them.
I asked that for the sake of people that have brought it up.
Yeah.
And then one other thing, that street level map that you showed of the city in different colors, which green, purple, what's the
Yes.
significance of the colors?
Okay, well, let me go back to it so we can just point straight at it. So the magenta color are going to be our three-phase power lines. Those are the ones that are going to look like, a cross, and then it's got three lines on the top and one neutral line below it. Then all of the other colors that you see there are going to be a single-phase line. It's either A, B, or C. It's one of those three phases that it's connected to. So that's what all the colors
Okay.
indicate.
Thank you.
And the reason that's so colorful is because we have to keep each one of those purple lines balanced.
Yes.
Because when you get when you start seeing imbalances on the grid, it causes issues back at the substation, which causes reliability issues. So,
And your balancing occurs by the green, the blue, and the red
Yes,
lines
sir.
feeding off of that, taking power
Yes,
from each of
at
the three
multiple
lines.
points all the way through that line. Yes.
I think this question is back
Yeah,
there.
you're talking about clear cutting underneath the power lines,
Yes.
and you said you're gonna spray underneath there.
Yes.
How often are you gonna spray?
Okay, like
Because, this stuff grows so fast here.
you're exactly right. So like Josh said, coupled with our re-clearing, Josh said we're trying to spray within 2 years after our re-clearing cycle. So we're not spraying a lot of product, on tall mature trees. We're getting when they're smaller.
Like a broken Coke bottle, the bottom of that can turn into a magnifying glass and grass and start a fire. See, that's what I'm looking at. When you clear cut, that's great. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell, don't hold this against me, I'm from California. But that's what happened there with the big fires. They don't clear cut underneath the power lines. The one in Malibu and that they don't clear cut, and that's the lines come down, and then they just start another one. And here in Bella Vista, we've had so many blowdowns, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I know in Idaho, people used to bid on clearing blowdowns out, because that's just fuel for fires.
Gotcha.
Like down our street, we have a strip of old dried up spring thing, and it's full of downed trees in there.
Mm.
well, I can tell you that one of the things that we would do if we were clearing that right away and we found that Coke bottle is we would pick the trash up so that we didn't have to worry about a fire coming in after us. We do try to leave it better when we're done than before we get there. Go
So you
ahead.
can go right down Reardon Boulevard here, and you get down there close to where the rec center and all that is.
Sure.
If you look on the south side of the street there, there's bushes that's grown up into the phone lines, so it's like, and it's wrapped up around the lines.
Yeah.
It's been like that for over a year.
Thank you, sir. I was probably remiss at work sessions. We normally only let
Oh,
council
okay.
ask questions,
Well,
so.
I'd like to get your information, we can have a follow-up.
Talk later.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to get your information, I'd like to have a follow-up with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for your time, gentlemen. We really
Thank you all.
appreciate it. Very informative. We're going to continue to jump around. The next thing we're going to do is item D and E, which has to do with the proposed extension of the 1% sales tax. And Cheryl Schluterman is here, and also Attorney Ryan Bowman from Friday Eldridge to talk about that subject. Cheryl?
Good evening, council and mayor.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us this evening. So you have a book before you, and then I think you have the slides we'll bring up so the public can see as well. So I've been meeting with the mayor and Ryan Bowman and Kim Hall and talking about, even before we did the franchise fee bonds about a year ago, to discuss, the sales tax bonds and the fact that they are paying off soon. So first I'm going to start with, and the need for some additional projects in the city. The first slide is the historical sales and use tax receipts. And as you can see, the city has had significant growth over the years. This goes all the way back to 2014. And the compounded annual growth from that period through 2025 is over 10%. And then the last 4 years, it's been anywhere from 5% to 10%, actually 14%, excuse me. So excellent. This is the 1% bond tax. Do I need to advance that slide or will someone?
We don't have this,
Oh, you don't have this?
we don't have that on, we have the ordinance. for-
Oh, okay.
This
Okay.
was just for council.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
Okay, no problem. So for the last 12-month period, the city has collected from that 1% tax about $4.5 million, just shy of $4.5 million. In 2020, the city issued bonds, sales tax bonds, in order to finance the construction of this building and then a fire station and the fire training facility. So those bonds, so they were supposed to be paid off all the way. The final maturity would have been October 1st, 2034, and those are set to pay off definitely by April 1st of 2027. So that was 14 years, and they're going to pay off actually shorter than 7 years because they may even pay off depending on how your sales tax continues to grow. They may pay off by the end of 2026. So what happens when your sales tax bonds, when you have a bond tax that is pledged to the bonds, as soon as those pay off, that tax goes away. So now is the perfect time to be looking at what else the city needs to use that 1% sales tax and get an extension. The other outstanding debt that the city has is the franchise fee debt that we did last year, and that was to work on the fire station number 4, correct? And the admin building. So we were able to do that, and that has a call date of December 1st, 2026. That's on slide 4. It has franchise fees pledged to it, and a final maturity of 12/1/2034. So your franchise fees that the city collects go to pay that bond issue.
Yeah, that was fire station number 1.
Number 1, sorry. I knew I was getting my numbers mixed up. My apologies. I have trouble keeping up with the station numbers. And Ryan will go over the election ordinance, but basically, when you go to extend the sales tax, you're asking the voters to extend the sales tax, the one that you already have, so we're not raising taxes, we're just extending the 1% tax. And then you're asking them several other questions on the projects that you will then issue bonds for and use that money to pay off the bonds for the specific projects. So the voters will have a chance to vote on each of those items. So this is very preliminary. Obviously, this will change by the time, assuming the citizens pass the election ordinance and the sales tax extension and all the projects. This is sort of a preliminary numbers on what that will look like. And then, so we've calculated based on rates as of July 10th, and you can see the par amount of the bonds is 30.64 million is what we're estimating. And then what you need to do is, because we don't know what interest rate will actually be by the time you're able to issue bonds, because that will, I'll show you a timeline in just a minute, and you can see that the election occurs November 18th, and then by the time all of the work gets done after that, it'll be probably February, March before you're able to actually issue the bonds and get the funds to do that. So interest rates will change, many times before that point. So this is strictly an estimate. In order to make sure you have sufficient funds, you want to make sure that you're asking the voters for the maximum possible amount that you need to complete each of these projects. And in working with the mayor and Kim, and then they were working with their departments, they had several new money projects. The fire and city admin complex, which we're estimating 7.5 million that's needed for that construction project. So we're suggesting working with them, $8 million is what you should ask the voters, not to exceed that amount. We have the new fire station and various apparatus, fire trucks, other equipment to go along with it. $5.4 million, and we're suggesting $6 million. Street improvements, that par amount of the bonds is $5.86 million, and we're suggesting 6.1 on the ballot. Police improvements, $2.54 million, and we're suggesting $3 million. So that's the new money projects. And so you have costs of issuing these bonds that go along with that. And so that's another thing that we would just want to make sure there's enough cushion. When the time comes, we don't necessarily have to issue that amount. We can issue exactly what you need to get the money that you need for the projects. The other two items that are going to be on the ballot in order, so once the election passes and you start a new sales tax, the old one essentially goes away that was paying the Series 2020. And so you're basically refinancing the 2020 into the new bonds. And you're required to do that because you no longer have that previous 1%. So on that, we estimate 4.3 million in par, and that's based on there being about a little less than 2 million built up in the debt service fund that's held by the trustee in between payments. Y'all are making sales tax payments. And so in order to be ultra conservative, just in case something crazy were to happen, like a pandemic or whatever, that we suggested 6.175 for that ballot amount. And that would absolutely cover you if you had zero in that account. But obviously, when the time comes, like I said, not to belabor that point, but when the time comes, whatever you actually need is what we'll do. And then the mayor wanted to also go ahead and pay off the franchise fee bonds. So we would do that as well, and that amount is right at $5 million, and we're just a little bit over that as well because there won't be a significant amount accumulated into that account. So those are our recommendations for that, and I think the mayor can speak more if he wants to about the rationale for that, but basically the franchise fee revenues are revenues that the city is able to operate on, and so to pay those off and just use the sales tax debt, it just frees up some, operating funds for the city. So any questions about the numbers? Feel free to interrupt me anytime and I'll ask questions, and then I'll move on a little bit to show you what the debt service schedule will look like.
When we sent out the emails the other day, we did have a chart from Kim that showed, because I thought people would say, well, 6 million for fire, what is that? So we had a chart that showed the different pieces of equipment and different things that added up to it. And I just wanted to add the one thing listed under police is for some new three new communication towers. And it's something like 1.3 million. That actually works for police and fire and streets. What we do now is we have communication equipment on top of the POA water towers. So we're gonna have our own towers in the same general location. And it works better that way. And actually it's kind of a pain in the neck for the POA, because if you go to paint the water tower, you have to take our equipment off, and so it's a little aggravating for them. But the signal, sometimes is going through the tower, so it would make a better signal. And frankly, people also thought it's considered superior to have your own towers. They'd be 198 feet at under 200 feet, and we get along great with the POA. We get along great with Tom Judson. But you never know in the future, there's going to be, we're all going to be gone, different people will be running things, and it would be probably better practice to have your own tower. Everybody in fire and police and streets was in favor of the concept, so.
Are all of the projects included that you've described in our approved capital plan currently, or do we need to amend that in order to facilitate this process?
Kim, do you want to speak
That
to
might be a
that?
question for Kim.
Not all of them are in the original. Every year you get the 5-year plan.
Well, we adopted the plan in
Yes, so-
December for this year, which had a 5-year look ahead.
Correct.
Capital-wise.
So those future years, about a little more than half are in here. Okay, for instance, the police is over $500,000 a year in new cars. And we have 2 years in here of police cars. Okay, so that's what you see down there. You'll see 1.2 million. So we would pull the 1.2 million out of that 5-year plan. Does that make sense? Is everybody getting that? Okay.
So it's a mix. Some of the things were in our capital expenditure plan already, and some
Yes.
weren't. For instance, the towers weren't.
Correct, that's where, thank you, that's exactly where I was going.
Concept.
And really what I was leading up to, if it's not in our current approved capital plan, can we in fact propose these in a financing plan without adopting an amended capital plan?
Yes, because what we're doing is approving the current year capital, and then we're showing you, for informational purposes only, we're showing you future plans. But we adopt a capital expenditure for the current year. So
Our current
these,
5-year plan, concept goal. for
right, we adopt the current year out of the 5-year plan. And these projects that are here would be in next year's plan and the next year's plan, right? So they'll come out of that 5-year look.
So in the fall, this fall, we'll be adopting the 2026 capital plan like we always do. And we'll be looking at this without knowing whether this passes or not. So there'll be,
Well, that is going to be interesting.
so there'll be a little.
I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah.
you know, maybe we have two and we say, okay, this is if nothing passes or, and then this is if everything passes, right? And then at the last minute when we come, we will know when it's time to approve the budget, we'll know.
But the election occurs on November 18, and you don't really pass the budget normally till December. In fact, you're not legally required till the end of January, but we've always done it before the year started, because it
And
works
we
better.
might, if you guys are open to it, we might pull the capital part away for the current year, for next year, right? And say we'll approve that part in January and the operating in December.
I'm not sure that we are able physically to do that unless
Well,
we
the
have to approve the
capital,
laws.
it doesn't have to be approved until January. Neither part has to be approved until January. So what I'm saying is if we took the operating and we stayed on this current plan with the operating, and then we did the capital in January. Just an idea to think about. So, but I don't want to get too off track. But that's where we don't know exactly, you know, what we're going to be, and it would only give us 2 weeks to modify the capital budget, and get it back to you, get it through some reviews, and get it approved. So whatever we decide to do there, that's a little bit, you know, that's a small little issue that we'll manage. I'm not worried about it. Somehow we're gonna manage that.
Okay, Shay?
Yeah, okay, so it'll be news to the other city council people, probably not news to a lot of the staff, but one thing that has been heavy on my mind, and I feel like we hear a lot of citizen input on this, is the complete lack of severe weather warning systems that we have in our city. I know Chief Sims and I have looked into this a little bit with the same company that Rogers uses. If we wanted to do a system in Bella Vista, really rough math is $630,000. I just feel like I would be missing this opportunity in this moment to say that I'm not sure it's prudent to spend $2 million on a redundant communication system when we could spend half that amount or roughly a quarter of that amount on a brand new system that I feel like our citizenry wants. And I think it's worth putting it up to them to be able to vote on that. That's ultimately what this is, right? We're deciding what goes on the ballot for our citizens to vote on. And I think that if they ask for it and it's their money, they should have the opportunity to get to vote on that. So I know a lot of people have already heard from me and they know I feel strongly about that. And I just wanted the opportunity to share that with my fellow city council members since we don't get to talk outside of this room.
Are you saying the redundant system with the new towers, or?
Yeah, because we do technically have that, right? And so we're taking it down and then putting it back up. But we're, you know, I mean, and we've seen more severe weather in this area. We all know that than we historically have. We saw the flooding in Texas here recently, and a lot of those folks weren't warned because the storm took out the cell phone towers. And so we're very reliant. I feel like we're very vulnerable here. So
I guess my question would be to the police department or fire department if they're experiencing any communication issues with the towers that are currently in place.
Yeah, we can have them speak to it. I wasn't really viewing the towers as redundant anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to take it down and put it back up, right?
It's a matter of what do we have in place? Does it work? Is it effective?
Chief Sims, are they experiencing any communication issues? Are there any dead spots with your radio systems in the city?
There is a few dead spots, and getting up off those water towers would help us out tremendously. It'd help us have better coverage, especially in the Highlands area and down in some of our low-lying areas. But what we're facing is our communication between all three towers is being on the water tower. It has to sometimes shoot through that area, and it can't. It gets blocked by that signal. So they call it dome deflection. When you're on a water tower, it causes it to kind of deflect off instead of push out. So yeah, we do have some issues with it. That's why we've been looking at moving to a tower of our own or having our own towers in place. And it's not the first time this has come up.
If you went to a new tower of your own, would you be on board with the rest of the NWA departments so you could communicate with them on mutual aid?
So part of this plan, I believe, Chief Graves, is that right? We're going to put an A-Winds repeater on that tower, on a tower, probably in the Highlands area.
Because you currently don't have one, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We're going to look at adding some A-Wind equipment for future. Yes. And then we'd have to do that on a tower, our own towers.
Just so council knows that, it's probably 6 years ago now, the county decided to move to an A-Win system so that all the agencies can talk to each other, but Bella Vista was kind of left out on that for whatever reason, so.
Well, we weren't really left out is I believe the PD really don't communicate that much with AWIN, like we do, like the fire department does.
The problem was, I mean, the way it was set up here, is we wouldn't, it was a whole different story. We wouldn't get the coverage up here that we needed because of the topography at the time. And my understanding at the time is they weren't willing to put a tower up here. So we decided to keep an internal system. Plus, once you're married to AWINs, and you're married to their radios, and the radios of all the agencies I've talked to every year, the radios get more and more expensive. And so we just decided as a city, as an entity, to stay internal with our own communication system. We have a patch over to AWINs when we have to talk to AWINs. I know fire talks to AWINs. And we are looking at getting some dual-purpose radios to allow us to talk to AWINs as well when we need to our other agencies as well, like fire does. And so another thing the mayor brought up is we don't own the water towers or POA water towers, so we're only on those towers because of the grace of the POA. Someday maybe that changes the relationship and they say get off our water towers, and then we're just, we're out of luck. And so I think if we're going to build our own system and finish out, since we have our own system, and put these towers up, now it's the time to do it. So it's not a redundant system we're building. We're just taking ownership and having our own system. And dome deflection is a big problem, like the fire chief was talking about, because he's around. The frequency just bounces off, but it can't get a straight shot, so we don't get as good coverage because of the dome deflection. So now's the time to do it. And so it's not a redundant system, and I'm not against what the council member talked about, some sort of emergency of, the weather event system. But I think there's also other county systems already in place with pagers or tech systems as far as that's concerned. But I think it's a needed thing.
Yeah, I think I don't mind bringing that up, but I do think it's two different things. I will give you a little more color to how we got to this. We talked to streets and fire and police about what they needed. Kim and I did, and when we were done, we were at 45 million. So we cut a lot of things out to get down to this number, and some of the things I think it'd be easy to argue would be better than sirens. But, there's a lot of different choices were made just to get where we're at now.
And I respect that, but our staff is really great, but what I didn't hear was citizen input, right?
Yeah.
On that process, and that's what we bring to the table, and so I just want to strongly state that I think our lack of severe weather warning, and if we have the opportunity to fit that $630,000 investment into this package, I feel really passionate about that, and I think a lot of people do. So,
Yeah,
thank you for hearing me.
I would say that's a lot of the feedback I've received from the public too, and just seeing a lot of the extreme weather, that I think
It's irresponsible.
better understanding of what we have in place, because yes, sometimes we get text message, sometimes we get weather alerts. It's not foolproof, and we have a very active outdoor community where potentially sirens could be heard. So I think it is important that we do consider that, and especially in this opportunity right now that we're looking at the bond issue and having the funds to do it. I think we owe it to the residents to ask.
Yeah, if there's a way to look
So
at
you
that.
both have had significant number of residents mention sirens to you?
I've had none.
I see it a lot on Facebook where there's a lot of conversation.
I see conversations, but I've had no reach out
Yeah,
to
I've
me.
never had a single person talk to me about it except Shay.
I've seen it online. Somebody had tagged me in it, but nobody's reached out personally. But I think that is a small price to pay for the protection of all the people that are outside. If we could fit it in here somehow.
Yeah, if we're looking at 34 million and it's 600,000.
30,000.
I think we can balance things if it's what the city wants, the residents.
Because this process will tie us up for a few years, right? There won't be an opportunity again. That's correct? But we're not doing this every 6 months, right?
That's a good question. She's estimating that it would pay off in 10 years if there is no increase in sales tax. So that makes me think it'll pay off like last time and
Perhaps, but I mean
about
that's
7. But yeah, it ties it up for a while, definitely.
sure.
I don't think the towers are the thing to cut out though. I don't know.
Sure, yeah, and I'm just throwing that out as one possible thing. You're right, there could be plenty of room, and I know we've been very conservative with our numbers, and I just would ask that I'm not sure exactly how the process is or how this cake was baked, but I would appreciate any consideration that we could do to that.
I do have a piece of information that might help with this just a little bit. And that is one of the reasons why I have proposed that we move at least 2 years of police and 2 years of streets and get some relief in our capital accounts, okay? So where I was going to mention is that if we decide that this is a need and we need to do it, just because it's not here doesn't mean we can't do it next year in next year's budget. If we feel like this is do you see what I'm saying? So that's approximately equal to 1 year of police cars.
Right.
So we would have that capital available
Yeah,
in
sure.
order to spend it on something like that. If you guys decide next year, you know what, we really need this, then you would have some capital available to do it. The other thing about sirens, and I don't know enough about sirens, let me just say that. But I have two observations. One, is there a operating cost to those? Because it's important not to just say that we're putting in sirens for 600, I think it was 30,000 is the number I wrote down. But anyway, is there an additional cost to the city each year because we have those sirens? I don't know. And then the other thing I would say is that having lived in a city where the sirens went off, you know, it didn't make any impact. They would go off inappropriately on a regular basis. And then when they did go off, nobody paid attention to them because they were so, but I'm not saying that would happen here. I'm just saying in Dallas that we went through this on a regular basis. Is I would wake up in the middle of the night to sirens, go into the bathroom to take cover, and then, you know, find out the tornado was 10 miles away. You know,
Yeah.
because of how they work.
If there's
But I
a
don't
tornado
know-
warning issue, they set the sirens off, so you may have been safe from it, but that's probably what was happening.
Yeah, so see, this is what I'm saying, is that, you know, people got where they didn't pay attention to the sirens because of that. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. If we really feel like that's something that we want to do, we would have some more room in our capital accounts.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Any other questions about this?
Larry?
My concern is putting projects in here that does not have the consensus in a plan so that we have our arms around it. In other words, we can put a wish list in there of a bunch of things, and we can throw a dollar amount at it, but it has no definition. And so I'm thinking that we should have some formal definition of what that project scope is and what it consists of generally. Obviously, it's going to be a broad type scope, but it's going to define what that expenditure is going for. And so we know what it's going to be, and the public who's going to vote on this issue extension will also understand that, and we as a governing body will understand what we're being asked to approve.
Well, Larry, let me, and Brian is the one that can address this, but in the proposal, each ballot question specifically states what it is that's getting purchased. So like on the fire improvement bonds. Aggregate principal amount of $6 million for the purpose of financing all or portion
It's in the packet.
of all costs of facilities and apparatus for the fire department, including particularly without limitation, a new fire station 5, a new fire truck, and upgrades to existing ambulance, any land acquisition, furnishing, equipment, and parking. It's all it has to be legally very well defined in terms of.
And if you look at the little thing I put together, all of these, so for instance, like where I say the fleet vehicles for 2 years, you can look at last year's capital request, and that is basically fire's budget for last year doubled, right? And where we say resurfacing year 1, resurfacing year 2, that is the street department's capital budget. So so you know exactly what that is. And again, I'm just trying to give us some room so that if we need money to do these capital projects in between refinancing this bond, we have some breathing space.
It's good foresight for sure, but there are other things like the road repair on, is it Oldham, other things will also pop up.
Correct. And that's what I'm trying to do, is make sure that we have the ability to meet the needs that the city has without going down below our reserves.
Just to be clear, the ballot, people have these different things listed and they vote yes and no on each one, fire and streets. And even if whether they vote yes or no, or even if they vote yes on everything, if you don't spend all the fire money, you can't take the extra and spend it on police. You're spending that on fire. They vote yes, so much for fire. You're spending that on fire, or you're not spending it.
Use tax bonds that were issued in 2020, as well as the franchise fee bond issue that we did in 2024. Then on the next page are the 4 separate questions for the new project. So that's the fire and city administration complex, the fire alone, the streets, and then on the next page are the police improvements. These questions will be approved independently, okay? So the voters can vote yes on one and no for something else. But it's important to note, Wanda, if you could go down to the first question, actually up, the start of section 3. In the refunding question, the 2020 refunding question.
Section 3.
Yeah, section 3.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
That's fine. In section 3, the first refunding question is refunding of the 2020. If every question passes, but that 2020 refunding does not pass, you can't do anything, because you have to free up the 1% sales tax that is currently pledged to those 2020 bonds. So it's important that if you do anything, the 2020 refunding bonds have to be approved by the voters, okay? And assuming that that's approved, then anything else will also be issued by the city for those particular projects. But wanted just to make sure that I emphasize that that 2020 refunding question is essential to what you're proposing to do as a council. But again, as we mentioned, each of those questions, I worked with the mayor and with Jason, with Kim, to put in those ballot questions a description of what you were proposing to accomplish with these bonds. And that was based off the information that Kim provided to me and also provided to the council. Again, not so descriptive that we're saying we're going to finance a certain gallon pumper truck, but it says we're getting a new fire truck. So it's descriptive enough to give the voters an idea of what you're going to finance without locking you in to it has to be a certain gallon truck. That information that Kim has provided to you all, I'm assuming will be presented to the citizens of the city as you go out and you promote this election between now and November the 18th. You'll share that information with them because they will want to know, okay, for the street improvements, what streets are you proposing to improve? For the fire, what is the fire truck? What are the upgrades to the ambulances? What is the fire station number 5 going to look like? So it's, again, enough description. They get an idea of what you're proposing to finance without being so specific that it backs you into a corner. So, but I did want to discuss the questions that were going to be on the ballot and how that would work with respect to the refunding of the 2020.
Ryan, if I could add one thing, you may be going to say this. If those bonds get refunded, then the people will pay a 1% sales tax if they approve any of the projects. So it's not like they would pay less than 1% sales tax if they
Correct.
only approved one of them. They're still gonna pay the same amount of tax. It's how many things do you wanna get and how much
That's correct.
how
You're
much
getting, that's right.
leverage you want to get over the course of time with relate to that 1%.
Are these ballot measures set in stone? Is this what we're sending?
That would be the exact language.
That's,
but
that's
I'll
the
let Ryan
language.
address that.
That's the language unless there's some changes made to it. But it's important to note that regardless of, as Jason said, how many ballot questions are approved, you're getting a 1% sales tax. And there's not an increase in the tax here in the city. So you're getting, you know, not quite $30 million, but over $20 million of new projects without increasing the tax rate here in the city. So that's the important thing to, again, educate the voters on. Without increasing your tax rate, we're getting to finance these additional improvements.
So with the additional projects we've been discussing this evening, it would be more, your list would be longer because you would have additional projects.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, with respect to the weather warning system, that probably would be an additional question that would have to be added. So it would take it from 6 to 7 questions. It would be a very small amount, you know, somewhere less than $1 million, I would suspect.
And if that adds to the total, we've got to talk to the finance people to make sure the 1% is sufficient to cover an additional $630,000. Because you're talking about potentially borrowing even more to add projects. Or you can take something off, but.
It is sufficient, I'll
Okay.
just say right now. If that's the
I
truth.
figured it would be.
The length of time it applies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of projecting 10 years, it might be 12 years you project.
Right. And I will say this, by paying off the franchise fee bonds, you have $700,000 a year now that isn't going to pay that debt. So there's your system right there, if you guys decide to do that.
In 1 year.
Yeah, in 1 year, yeah.
Yeah, that was exactly where I was gonna go next, is if number 2 passes, if that number 2 for the refunding bonds passes, then the savings is $720 some odd thousand a year. So we would be at a good, the other thing that, I don't know, one of the things that is concerning to me is the fact that the city as a whole is going under a lot of changes. We have buildings that we have some new stuff coming up, and there's been some ideas that we know we've lost businesses, just take Domino's, for instance. We get sales tax from Domino's. CVS is probably gonna go away. So I am trying to make sure we have reserves to meet those issues, so that we're not feeling strapped for the next couple of years while we see the new plans for the city manifest themselves and the city grow. I think that what we're probably going to see is the sales tax is probably going to, I'll be surprised if next year we have an increase in sales tax. I think they'll probably be pretty flat. And then in the next couple of years, we'll see that go up and up and up as the new plans from Blue Crane start to take effect. The other thing is that there's some property tax considerations that are going to happen from the developments as well. So I feel like it's incredibly important for the city to make sure we have strong reserves to do any of those things, because after 2 years, we're going to have to go back and spend $500,000 a year on police, right? 2.4 on streets. So we need to build up some money so that we have that capacity while the city, because I think we'll come to, in 3 to 5 years, we'll come to a point where the growth will be pretty significant. But the next 3 years, I don't think we're going to be at the same pace that happened.
So I want to shift just a minute and say that we'll look at the amortization schedule in a second, but I do want to say there's a lot of structuring that we can do when we do the bond issuance, and we can have a short call, to your point about not being able to do anything for a long time, depending on what the market and how much we're willing to basically, give on the interest rate. We could do a super short call, 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever. And then that gives you flexibility to do another election like this in 4 years or whatever is comfortable for the council and the mayor. And you're able to basically do this all over again because of your growth. it's very possible for you to go back out again in a short time period. So we can certainly look at that and make sure that you all have flexibility in that because of the growth of the sales tax and the growth of the city. So and if there's nothing else, I'll just move on to the, and we can go back to anything with you all have
I have one more
questions.
quick
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
The voters will be presented the paragraph that describes it, right?
yes.
Because and maybe I'm
I'll
thinking,
defer to Ryan just to be
Okay.
safe, but
and maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I feel like a lot of people may see that it'll be levied a new 1% sales tax,
Sure.
and then that's all they're going to read, and then they're going to vote no.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. Legally, it's a new tax, okay? Because the 2020 tax can only be used to pay debt service on the 2020 bonds. And so when that bond issue goes away, that 1% tax that was approved by the voters back in 2020 will terminate, okay? And so it technically is a new tax only in the sense that it will go into effect once the voters have approved this. But it's important for the education process that you explain to them that there will not be a change in the tax rate. Okay?
There's no increase in
Can we
cost.
bump it up or change the order?
Yeah, or could we put something in here that says this is not an increase?
It says it'll replace, but
Yeah, it says the tax will replace the
But
city's
pre-
existing
are we
1%
able to
sales and use tax
bump
levy
that to the
pursuant
top?
to.
Right.
if people see that part, they might,
Yeah,
they
I understand.
might not stop reading.
These things have to be
Certain.
yeah, very
Yeah,
good.
there's some nuance here, but again, it's important, I think, in the education process, because hopefully when the voters show up at the ballot box on November the 18th, they've heard from you all. They've been to town meetings, and that education process can already have occurred, so that when they go into the ballot box, they're not reading this for the first time, thinking, okay, this is in effect.
And if there's things they care about and that they want on it, it helps get a yes, if they feel like they've been heard.
So the question is,
Yeah.
what funds do we have allocated to education? Because we're going to have
The
to.
city cannot spend official resources to advocate for ballot measures. What we can do is provide information. So we can't go out and create a bunch of bumper stickers that say, vote yes for the bond issue. We can't spend taxpayer dollars for that. You as people can go out and tell people how it's important and advocate as you can or against. You all may not be for it. You know, there may not be unanimity on the council about it. But, I mean, that's up to you to have discussions and to participate. But these efforts in terms of, you see a sign that says, vote yes for the city, for the, private citizen groups put that together. Those taxpayers cannot use their money. The government cannot use taxpayer money to do that.
Would there be any, like, just an open forum, people could come
Sure.
and learn more about it?
Yes, we can
Schedule-
provide information.
Perfect.
In fact, what we've done
Educational.
in the past is, I don't know if our communications director is here, but we can provide a website, information about the bond election. Here's, you know, if you vote yes, this is what it's for. If you vote no, this is what happens, you know. It just provides all that stuff. And of course, it's intended to be helpful for those things, but it's never going to say it's important to vote yes or vote no, either way, of course. But
So can we restructure the paragraph and put that this will replace the existing?
you have to understand that the ballot language, and Ryan can address this more, but it is incredibly important that the language be just so, because we probably have some case law that says, hey, this has worked and we know this works, and if we start dinking around with it, we'll end up screwing the whole thing up. I'll just be quite honest with you. And we'll
I'm
create
not-
voter confusion or something, and we know that this is what it is. There are going to have to be some citizens out there, and you all are citizens like anyone else, but they're going to have to go out there and advocate and educate people and say, if someone comes to you and says, no, you're lying, you're going to charge me more tax. Well, I don't know what you can say to them other than when they go to the grocery store after it's done, they're going to see that it's the same amount of tax. I mean, that'd be a heck of a lie to tell, to be quite honest, but who knows what people would say. But I guess if they want to get in the weeds with you, you could say, you're right. Technically, technically, legally, it is new, and also technically, legally, we're terminating the prior one.
So the city can educate, not
Right.
advocate.
That's a good, yes, we can
Okay.
educate.
So,
With official funds.
To the tune of $0.
You can go, if someone talks to you, and you can say, yeah, absolutely, I want you to vote for it, you know, and you're doing that as just part of your conversations with people. That's great. You can do that. We just can't fund a campaign as a city, is what I'm saying.
I want to
Flyers, stickers, bumper stickers.
all that. We can provide we can provide informational flyers, but you wouldn't want to send out a mailer to everybody saying, vote yes for the bond issue, and here's the pretty pictures of everything you're gonna get. You can't really do that.
Yeah, Cassie can help us with this. She's done this before with our other elections. I did want to mention something. I do think it's important that it's not a tax increase. That's the number one argument. But another argument that I think is very good is Fayetteville. But if this passes, our sales tax will be like it is now, 2%. Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, Bentonville are all at 2%. And I have a list here of cities with significant sales tax. And the great majority, say, take the top 30, we're number 27. The great majority are 2% or more. Several of them are more. But it's something like 90% of them are 2%. So you're not doing anything, you know, not only is it not an increase, it's not out of line with what other people are doing.
And I like to point out that this is the one way that visitors to the city pay for some of the improvements that they're going to enjoy while they're here. So, you know, police, fire protection, you know, roads, they're driving, all of those things are things that people who come to Bella Vista as tourists and ride our trails. This is it. This is the number one way that they are going to help pay for some of those amenities that they get to use while they're here.
And I'll just add one more thing about that is that we highly recommend the sales tax issues that we've seen pass by, you know, a large majority is by the council and the mayor getting out and educate. You've got to educate the citizens about this so that they truly understand, like Ryan said, what they truly understand when they go to vote. So. Okay, the next slide just shows, this is slide 6. So the refunding pieces are taxable because we're calling them we're refunding them prior to their call date. And so they're a little bit shorter as well because they were already fairly short to begin with, the final maturity. And then we did tax exempt for all the new money is tax exempt. And so you can see on there the all-in cost percentage for the tax exempt. We've estimated, again, this will change, but 4.75. And you can see the total debt service is right at 2.2 million out to 3/1/2037, and then the annual debt service, and that's principal and interest. That goes up to 2.7 million for the remainder, and again, it pays off 3/1/2046 is the final maturity. But if you flip to the next page, and we've made various assumptions in here, but we've been involved as your municipal advisor for a long time, so and we're in the market every day, so it's, as of right now, it's a good estimate. On page 7, we show, so these sales tax bonds, you have a mandatory redemption feature, which is why your 2020 are paying off so soon. So you have 4.5 million collected each year, and then so 2.1 will go to debt service, and then any additional what's called surplus revenues that will go into an account, and that will pay down even further.
Yeah, because
it's a mandatory. Yeah, go ahead.
Because collections of this tax can only be used to pay debt service on this new bond issue. Okay, so that's why, as Cheryl is stating, the surplus tax collections over and above what's needed to pay debt service in any given year are used to pay off those bonds already.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so the city doesn't get to keep the difference. That goes down to pay it off, and that's why it gets paid down so quickly. So at zero growth, which means if you keep collecting exactly 4.5 million for here until 2035, they'll pay off March 1st, 2035. So with any kind of growth, they'll pay off even sooner. Should give you an idea of that. So any questions about just that mandatory redemption? Okay. And that's what the previous bond issue had as well. The next slide is a very tentative calendar of events to let you know kind of the process, because I know we have a few new council members as well, and it's been 5 years since the the current council members that have been around have done this. So you can see August 4th, we're hoping that, are planning on you being able to adopt an ordinance calling the election, and passing the language that Ryan has before you in this work session. And then we have some dates that are set by law that you have to do, and we have out there no later than, that you have to file with the county clerk, so that has to be done 70 days prior to the election. Absentee ballots have to be filed no later than August 2nd, so hopefully those can get done prior to that date, but we wanted to give you the absolute drop dead date that would happen. The election is November 18th, because the 11th is Veterans Day. And then you can see we have proclamation of election results published. Hopefully that will all be in and we're able to have that published. And then you would need to, so I am municipal advisor as Raymond James. We will issue an RFP in November is the plan, to hire an underwriter that will actually sell the bonds. And we'll work with them to structure and hold them accountable and all those things. So that will be distributed. We'll have those due in December. And then y'all will adopt a resolution authorizing the offering of the bonds. So this will come back to you to say, okay, here's where interest rates are now, here's where we think, and there'll be some, you can actually decide how much you want to issue. So at that time, if something changes, you don't have to issue everything that is on the ballot. But those are the only things you can issue and the maximum amount you can issue them for. So, and then December 30th, initial draft of financing documents from Ryan's firm, and then submit those to rating agencies and bond insurers if we do that. So we do that. We'll submit the documents that Ryan prepares and ask the rating agency to give us a rating on the credit worthiness of the sales tax bonds for the city of Bella Vista. And if we decide to get insurance, which we may or may not, we do a cost benefit analysis, and we would submit that to them as well and get a premium quote back from them. And then, so we'll receive those quotes. We'll put together a preliminary official statement, which is your marketing document for the bonds. It's your document. We work with Ryan, the city, and my firm and the underwriters, and make sure that that fairly reflects the sale, and start marketing the bonds. Review those with you February 13th, and then actually offer the bonds on February 16th. So that's the actual sales date. And then that evening we will meet to adopt the bond ordinance. And then everybody signs to say, yes, we're purchasing these bonds, and then publish the bond ordinance, and that has to be out for 30 days. So that's why those dates, there's a reason for most of these dates. Either we know how long it will take, or there's some requirements in these. And then the final official statement that has all of your interest rates, everything that is finalized in the sale, will appear in a final official statement that will be given to investors. And then we will close again tentatively March 24th, which is the day that you actually receive your funds. So that's kind of a rough estimate of how long it takes on a sales tax bond issue, which is why we're trying to start now. And then I have some market slides in here, but unless you want me to go through them, I will not bore you. I know this has already taken longer than you probably wanted. I see council member shaking her head. Yes, please don't. Do you have any additional questions for me? I know Ryan needs to go over the ordinance probably again because, to answer questions on those specific details. But that's sort of an estimate of what that will look like when the bonds are issued, assuming they're all passed, all the measures.
So we're looking at adopting the ordinance to move this forward formally in about 2 weeks. Is that right?
So we're doing a special.
It's going to be a special meeting.
Yeah, it's going to be Monday, August 4th.
And then we have roughly 2 months to sell it.
To educate, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well,
You can sell it on your free time, but yes, the
but
city has to
to
educate.
educate, but we're really selling the value and the benefit of it to our constituents.
And one thing I will add is in the ballot, it has a maximum principal amount of bonds to be issued for each of those projects. That's required by the Constitution, that there is a ceiling that is approved by the voters as to how much you can issue in bonds for those specific projects. And so when you add those maximum principal amounts, you'll see on page 5 of the handout that Cheryl provided, the maximum principal amount is just a shade under $35 million. But the bond issue would only be around $30 million. So just keep in mind if the voters say, well, I thought we were talking about $30 million in bonds, but if they were to add all 6 of those maximum principal amounts, that gets to a higher dollar amount. So I just wanted to clarify that number that you see on the ballot is tied to that language that's highlighted in yellow on page 5 of Cheryl's.
So how do we reconcile that then? I mean, how's that reconciled? Because
Well, here's the thing, you gotta explain to the voters that, one, we don't know what interest rates will be, and that will make you have to borrow more to get the same amount, and we don't know exactly what, there's inflation between now and then, based on the estimates that each of the departments has provided between now and then, so those are...
So these numbers are really inflated to a degree?
Yes, they provide a cushion so that
Right.
you are able to do the actual projects that the city really wants to be able to accomplish, yes.
But not a lot.
Not a lot.
All right, and we won't issue
Clear.
more than what you need for your project. So just because it says we're going to issue $6 million for project X, doesn't mean that we're going to issue $6 million if you only need 5.5 for that particular project. That's just a ceiling. We have the authority to issue up to that amount, but we don't have to issue that full amount. Pretty much it's important that we went over section 3, which are the ballot questions, and just with the understanding that the 2020 refunding has to be approved before anything else can be financed. There is a resolution that is the second item that would be considered by you at the special meeting on August the 4th. Adoption of that resolution will allow the city to go ahead and expend its own funds, and then assuming the bonds are approved, to get reimbursed from the proceeds of the bonds for the costs that were expended by the city prior to the election date. In particular, that would be subsection A, the improvements to the fire and city administration complex, because in the next 3 months, between now and November 18th, you'll continue to make improvements to that complex, which will, again, adoption of this resolution allow you to reimburse yourself from proceeds of the bonds when they're issued in early 2026.
One thing that people often don't bring up, I think makes the taxpayers feel good. A lot of people don't realize when you have these sales tax bonds, the money goes straight to the trustee, and the trustee pays all the bills. I never touch it or see it. Kim doesn't. There's no way you can say, oh, I think I'll take this money and go buy a new car or do something else. We never get any of it. We never see it. We never touch it. So it's very secure. I think that's actually in life that's done mostly for the, I mean, you can weigh in. I think that's done to make the people who are investing in the bonds feel good about it.
Absolutely.
That's
They
right.
invest and they want to get their money.
Yeah, what
But
we
it's
found
really
is
good for the taxpayers too.
Right. What we found is that the bondholders
Yeah.
like the fact that the city never receives the tax collections. So you're not just holding that money and then every 6 months you're paying them. Well, there might be some temptation to spend it on something else. So it's all going to the trustee, as the mayor said. The trustee is simply using it only for payment of debt service. And then there will be separate funds created for each of the projects, assuming that they're all approved, or any of those are approved. And those construction funds are held by the trustee as well. And so the city will just submit a requisition to the trustee for payment of the invoice for that particular project. So even the bond proceeds for those projects are not held by the city, they're held by the bond trustee. Just like they were back in 2020 on that bond issue.
So when somebody says, hey, I'm voting $6 million for fire equipment, they know darn sure it's going to be for fire equipment. It's not going to be for anything else. Nobody's going to have it and do something else with it. So I think that's reassuring to taxpayers. know that.
Back to Shay's question, is there a way to add the storm sirens onto this? I don't know if we ever got clarification on that.
Well,
Or we just want to use the.
I think there's a way to do other things, but, you know, they have advised us, it's good not to have too many questions. So I think Kim's idea that, hey, we'll have some money, if you want to do that, let's do it with some other money, I think isn't a bad, I mean, I get her point, but it'd be easier not to mess around with this. And like she said, if we're buying $600,000 worth of police cars with this, then I guess you must have $600,000 for sirens that year, right?
And then, worst case scenario, could this be presented to them in the general election if it fails in November?
Would be in the primary in
It could be, yeah, it could be in March,
March.
yeah.
And then it
Yeah,
go
I
on
think
to
you
the
can
3
represent, right? So I think it'd be best to pass it first time.
Absolutely, I agree. Okay. Thank you.
We really appreciate your coming all this way to educate us.
So those D and E will not be on Monday's agenda, they'll be on August 4th.
Yeah,
Different agenda, so it's a little different than what you're used to.
right.
D and E, okay, that's right, it'll be special.
D and E will not be on Monday's agenda.
Right.
It'll be on the
Special's
special.
on August
Even though they're
4th.
on this
Special meeting.
discussion agenda,
Yeah.
they're not here.
Yeah,
These are the ones that go on August 4th.
D and E will be on August 4th special agenda,
yeah.
not
Okay.
on this coming Monday's agenda.
Yeah. Okay, the next items, I appreciate your patience, sorry about all the delay, is ordinance B and C, which has to do with the new zoning. Will be is adopting a new zoning ordinance and map for the city of Bella Vista, chapter 109, repealing prior zoning ordinances and maps and for other purposes. And C is adopting a new subdivision ordinance for the city of Bella Vista, chapter 107, repealing the prior subdivision ordinance and for other purposes.
Okay, well, Dawn's setting up, we'll just give a quick preference. This has been a very, very long project. I first asked for council's blessing, our initial temperature check, whatever you want to call it, in mid-2022, to discuss funding this project. And after further discussion of our current code, how it was created, its existence of a mixing pot of all the nearby cities, because we were created so quickly, it doesn't speak to Bella Vista. We have topography or development constraints that nowhere else in Northwest Arkansas has, on top of adopting a new comprehensive plan just 2 years prior in 2020. The consensus was that it's time for a new code and it's time for the city staff and city as a whole to invest in that new code. So it was budgeted for in 2023, and then the project began with the RFQ process in spring of 2023. Friesen Nichols was selected from that RFQ process, and we went under contract after council approved said contract in August. September officially kicked off in 2023. Stakeholders kicked off in October of 2023. We met with the council then at that time, planning commission, developer at that time. Developers changed since then. We met with residential builders, commercial builders, ADH, all the utilities nearby, to kind of kickstart this, as well as a very large and successful public engagement effort through surveys, a project management website, which has been up throughout the lifespan of this project, is still up. If you do want to view those, I hyperlinked them to my staff memo that you guys have. You can still view the project map, which is super cool, where people dropped thumbs up or thumbs down, things they liked, things they didn't like, or just things they want to see, as well as the wishful thinking board is what I call it. It is basically an online integrated sticky note board of old school planning, pretty neat. But all those are still viewable for your indulgence if you like data mining as I do. Still up for you to view those. Over 1,000 comments were selected during phase 1 of public engagement during that quarter of the project. Phase 2, the draft.
Did you say we had 1,000 comments?
Over 1,000 comments, yeah, during phase 1. Yep. Bella Vista does show up quite a bit for public engagement, I will say. So that's always great to see, especially when we're doing this and we're trying to see, what's relevant, what's not relevant, what's working, what's not working.
Phase 2's been the longest. That was the actual drafting phase. That took, gosh, probably about a year, a little over a year, to rewrite 109, 107 through technical review staff, as well as stakeholders. The zoning map proposed by Ed and I went through the very thorough technical review and shared with stakeholders. And that brought us to phase 4, which we are currently and officially in. It passed through the first phase of phase 4. The Planning Commission, after holding the public hearing on June 14th or July 14th here recently, we only had 2 show up for the public hearing, one of which was supportive for trying to transfer their time to the other speaker. So really primarily we collected 1, and then you have a copy of the open house comments or phase 4 comments in my staff memo. I think there's about 17 there. So not as much as phase 1. The engagement is not near as what it was during the open houses or online comment portals or anything like that. But again, all the phase 1 comments are still relevant. That's why we went out there and that's why we sought it. They still apply to what you guys are getting ready to discuss up to potentially 3 times. So with that, I will turn this over to our consultant, Friesen Nichols, project manager, Dawn. She's been with us from the beginning. You may recognize her from the open houses if you're new, or if you've been here since phase 1. She has been here literally since the beginning. So Dawn, I turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me back. I think it was just under a year ago that I was here and brought Jake along with me to give everybody a mid-project update. So we're pretty glad that we're moving things along. There was a brief hiatus in the project as the state legislature was in session trying to, well, actually toying with some of the enabling legislation related to planning. So we did have some additional adjustments to make based upon, for instance, the abolishment of extraterritorial jurisdiction and some other actions that were taken by the legislature. But we are here close to the end point. But what I want to do is basically take us back and walk you through kind of how we got here and what some of the key elements of this code update are. I'll try not to take too terribly long. I've got a lot of slides, but several of them are just like going to go pretty quickly. So as Taylor mentioned, the diagnostic report was phase 1 of this project, and it really created a roadmap for us to identify the things that needed to be adjusted and the things that we really needed to focus our efforts on as we went into the code update process, actual writing in phase 2. So just as high-level project goals from the initiation of the project were really to ensure that the city has a code that is less conflict, well, eliminates conflict. In 2007, when the city incorporated, there was an effort to cobble together the necessary regulations to ensure that you had what you needed to administer zoning and subdivision requirements. And since 2007, obviously the city has grown quite a bit, has evolved, and it's been recognized for a while that those regulations were not really serving in the way that they needed to. So streamlining processes was another component of that. There are, I guess, challenges with the various entities that are involved in the development review process that is unique to Bella Vista, but that's part of what we're trying to do as well in that reducing conflict statement towards the bottom of this. But the city had also adopted a comprehensive plan, and that is your overriding policy guidance relative to growth and development, and you need your regulations to align with that policy in order to get the development on the ground that reflects what the community wants to see. So those were some of our big project goals, in addition to balancing all the different dimensions of review and approval that are present, and starting to address or addressing the growth pressure that is occurring all over Northwest Arkansas, but specifically for Bella Vista. You know, we know that this area of the country, this community in particular, is growing very quickly, and so having regulations in place that facilitate the kind of growth that you want to see in the manner that you want to see it, and also protecting the natural character of Bella Vista were all top of mind as we began the process. The diagnostic report obviously was to set the stage. We analyzed, adopted policies and plans, engaged stakeholders, as was mentioned, talked to local experts and agencies, and also Through that process, we identified a series of changes and possible solutions, or issues and possible solutions that needed to be addressed in the actual writing process. Just a recap of what we have done relative to engagement and involving the community, particularly stakeholders. For those of you that were here during the comprehensive plan, that is a very much community-driven process, and it's a process whereby the community establishes a long-range vision, a vision statement, a series of guiding principles. The code is different in that it's very technical, and it is an implementation step of the comprehensive plan. So it's not rehashing and creating something new. It's taking the guidance that was given by the community and sort of documented within that plan and adopted by the governing body, and applying it to the tools that are used to control development within the city. So beginning in October of 23, we conducted 8 different stakeholder meetings. In early 24, we presented the diagnostic report to the Planning Commission and City Council. Got that sort of bundled up and agreed upon, and then we began the drafting process, came back here in August of 24 with that mid-project update, and then in June of 25, we conducted an open house meeting, and staff conducted several additional meetings that brought people to review and have an opportunity to see the draft documents, chapters 107 and 109, and the zoning map. Sort of back to October, the online outreach consisted of a survey, as well as the online tools that are embedded in the project website, that being the ideas wall and the interactive map. That again has been effective and continuous up to, well, now I was actually looking at it a little while ago. Through all of these efforts, we've developed a series of diagnostic themes, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but that basically gave us sort of benchmarks for the different issues that were going to be addressed within the report. The October 2023 meetings, we had 24 stakeholders participate, and in the June open house, we had 31 participants sign in. Between October of 23 and December of 23, the survey was active, and we received 666 comments. The ideas wall brought in just over 260, and the interactive map, people put about 100 pins or markers on the map indicating that they liked or disliked certain elements of development within the community. So the takeaways that we got through those efforts, increasing design standards was one of the questions that we asked, and these were actual input boards at the stakeholder engagement meetings. It was a little bit mixed. About 4 people were in favor of increasing design standards, about 4 out of 10 were in favor, about 3 out of 10 were against. Landscaping, most folks responded that it was very important, fewer responded that it was not. Allowing accessory dwelling units, more in favor than against. And relative to parking, most said parking's not an issue in the city. About 2 out of 10 said there are too few spaces available. So that was not an expected response, but that's what we heard. So we talked a little bit earlier about how the feedback identified various themes within the engagement, and so these themes we have titled them. Entanglement is really the nature of the fact that Bella Vista has a multitude of different layers of development review and approval. So some properties are subject to POA covenants, some are not, and there's a different process for people to go through. The code doesn't resolve that. The code acknowledges that that is a part of development within Bella Vista. Water management, particularly stormwater, is something that was brought up several times and was a common theme through the discussion. Particularly things like retaining walls and driveway slopes were part of that conversation. Septic systems, again, this is not necessarily something that is resolved within the code. It's acknowledged that there are issues relative to, environmental, administrative, and your ability to grow and continue to develop the way that you want to with limited sewer access. With regard to zoning and land use, this really kind of focuses, and this is very much relevant within the code, particularly in Chapter 109, where we needed to update the various land use types, make sure that we weren't dealing with antiquated land uses, or that there were gaps that didn't represent different types of land uses that are modern and needed to be included. Development constraints, again, this is just something that we needed to work through and try to align as best as possible so that there is a streamlined review process that provides the fewest roadblocks and challenges to a developer that is bringing in a project that is consistent with the type of development that the city has identified as desirable. And then with regard to staff flexibility and coordination, we felt like the code needed to be updated in a way that could provide more authority to staff for administrative level reviews with necessary guardrails. So providing different, and we'll talk about use specific as well as general development standards that are included in your updated regulations that support staff flexibility. And while this isn't going, do that out here. There we go. So the diagnostic report was the result of that. The objectives that are expressed in the report include expanding the housing stock and the types of housing that can be developed within the city, preserving open space and recreational opportunities. That's really baked into Bella Vista. We need to make sure that that's still part of your character and culture. Economic vitality, allowing for a broader range of mixed use and infill development, really supporting those types of activity. Improving connectivity, not just vehicular connectivity, but also for pedestrians and cyclists where possible, and providing clarity. So all of the users of the code, whether they are on the staff side or on the applicant side, have a better understanding of how they can utilize these tools to accomplish what they would like. So this is a series of slides that really just goes through the various recommendations. Not all of them are included here, but the key ones are. So we created a definitions article for each chapter. So chapter 107 and 109 each have definitions sections. In 109, it's a two-part section of definitions. One part identifies all of the land use types. So in your use table, you see a laundry list of different types of uses and where they can be permitted. The definitions article within chapter 109 has general terms that you find throughout the code, but then also a section that's specific to those land use terms, so you can jump right to those. There was a recommendation to improve the user interface of the code by incorporating images, graphics, and diagrams, so similar to what you see here, that was addressed. Creating a uniform procedural format. So all development applications, whether they are related to subdivisions or related to zoning, we've identified what we call a uniform procedure for applications. They may require different submittal materials. They may go to different boards or commissions, but this provided basically a clear set of steps for people to follow. Aligning street classifications with the master street plan, ensuring that in the subdivision regulations, the right-of-way widths and pavement widths for the streets that are adopted in your master street plan are reflected in your regulations. Reducing the engineering burden and clarifying standards for retaining walls. You'll see as we get further along, there's a new specific section for retaining walls in the development standards. Establishing a zoning district to accommodate programmed outdoor recreation. So understanding that commercial recreation occurs primarily where your property, the POA owns property and provides for golf courses, lakes, marinas, clubhouses. That's not nature preserve, so it's not preservation, and we didn't want it to continue to be called preservation. We needed to acknowledge that that's commercial recreation, and that will reduce the amount of conflict between the types of applications that the POA needs to pursue for their continued activities. So they want to expand a clubhouse or something to that effect. They're in a zoning district now that recognizes that use and can accommodate those updates. Creating commercial and mixed-use districts, that again is reflective of the future land use recommendations within your comprehensive plan. Mitigating conflict with residential deed and covenant restrictions. We don't completely eliminate that, but it is acknowledged, and this is maybe a good place to clarify, where properties within the city are governed by private covenants. They are still governed by private covenants, no matter what you all do with regard to Chapter 107 and 109. This does not supersede them. They're in place. So even if the zoning that is presented would allow for something broader than what the covenants currently allow, the zoning is not what's going to dictate those restrictions. So it's just important that those are still in place. And that's important because people often will say, well, I don't want to do a duplex, or I can't do a townhome because my covenants restrict that. Well, they still do that. They still restrict that. If your covenants say you can have one single family home per property within this particular neighborhood, then regardless of what the map says or anything else, that is the rule. So there are legal ways to address that are beyond the scope of this project. Context-sensitive use-specific standards. So use-specific standards are exactly what they say they are. So for instance, there may be an additional setback required between a single-family zoning district and a mixed-use or commercial zoning district that requires additional buffer space, because those two activities are, the commercial activity, for instance, is higher intensity, may create more noise, more traffic, more light, for instance, than what happens in a single-family residential area. So these are context sensitive. They address things like what we call residential adjacency, and so those have been baked in. And there are other types of use-specific regulations, and they are broken out and specified. They're also referenced in the use table, which we'll see in a little bit. The number of uses that are in your use table. So one of the things that we were encouraged to do was to reduce the overall number of uses, but also to update them so that they reflected more modern use types. And so the existing use table in today's Chapter 109 includes 111 uses. The proposed has 96. I realize that's not a huge difference, but there are some other changes, notably that in the current regulations, just under 15% of the uses that are in the table require conditional use approval. That's been reduced to about 5% of the uses that require conditional use approval. And the reason we were able to do that is because we have established universal development standards and also use-specific standards for things that currently require conditional uses in large part. The sign regulations needed to be updated. Most of the updates are really speaking to content neutrality and also just addressing the way that signage is most appropriately hitting the ground here. So that part has been updated, revised, and clarified. Temporary sign permitting process, so that was updated as well through the project. And let's see, there was a recognition that the city was interested in some outdoor lighting standards that were more speaking towards dark sky criteria. So it is not the entire model ordinance for the Dark Sky Association, but it is the pieces of it that we feel like are very appropriate for applications here in Bella Vista, and that will provide that limitation on light trespass and light pollution. Let's see. Infill and redevelopment standards, you'll find these kind of baked into the development standards. And we also have a section specific to steep slopes that is definitely catering to the slopes and the types of terrain that you have here in Bella Vista that is that are not present in most other communities. Architectural design, so architectural design standards cannot be applied to single-family residential uses. However, they can be applied to other types of uses. So this has been incorporated so that you have some parameters for both materials as well as sort of the arrangement of those materials, proportions, and basically trying to avoid things like large unarticulated wall surfaces to animate buildings and make them fit into the context of the city. So that was the high level over the diagnostic report. We're going to dive into some of the specifics of Chapter 107 and 109, but I'm going to take a breath, and if there's any questions, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Then I'll move into organization. Okay, so both chapters you'll see follow a similar organization. So this is what we have as far as the division of sections within Chapter 107 between general provisions, the design standards, so what blocks and lots and streets and the different components of a subdivision, how those are required to be designed, different performance standards and maintenance guarantees for ensuring that you get infrastructure that meets the criteria and has been inspected and approved, the procedures for applying for different types of subdivision applications, who administers, who has like approval authority, the definitions, and a couple of external appendices. In 109, similarly, you have articles, divisions, and sections. This one basically goes from a very general, the enabling legislation, the who does what type thing, zoning districts and uses, development standards. Under the uses is where you find the use-specific standards. Then you get to the development standards that are more general for all development projects, procedures for any type of zoning applications, nonconformities and how those are addressed, enforcement, administration, and those two sections of definitions that I mentioned previously. So things that have changed for Chapter 107, the things that we're focused on here, I didn't move these over to 109. Many of these things actually moved over to 109.
That's what the slide's saying, content location moved from subdivision.
No, thank you, I should just read my slide. So this is a change that affects, okay, I introduced it as Chapter 107. Previously, Chapter 107 was subdivision and other developments. And we moved a lot of the content from Chapter 107 to 109, and the reason is, well, twofold. The majority of Bella Vista is already platted. So it's already divided into, it's already subdivided into legal recorded lots. The second reason is that there is no longer an extraterritorial jurisdiction. So under previous situations, you would be able to apply basically all of Chapter 107, which is subdivisions and other development, to anything outside of the city limits within your ETJ. Because you don't have that, all of these criteria are much more specific to a development application and a site-specific development. So we moved these over to Chapter 109. So a lot of these things fall under the development standards that are now baked into 109. And just like for graphic purposes, Chapter 109 is now pretty beefy, and Chapter 107 is very streamlined because it is very focused on subdivisions and the processes by which they are created. 109 basically packs in everything else. All right. Subdivision processes, we just moved those around, changed the organization of 107 to some degree, and then also talked about the types of subdivisions. So those were adjusted a little bit as well. Some things, the versions of these drafts that are posted on the project website were posted on June 26th. On June 28th, there was a Planning Commission work session, and on July 3rd, there was another...
June 30th
Oh,
and
sorry,
July
thank
3rd.
you. June 30th and July 3rd, there were work sessions with the Planning Commission, and then July 14th, the Planning Commission heard and made a recommendation to move these items forward. So there are some recent updates that have occurred kind of through that process. We made some adjustments to legal provisions. That was really expanding the easement's applicability. It was very focused, and we broadened that. There was typos. Most of these things are pretty, I guess, straightforward, I get, but they show up right now as red lines in the working draft. Survey standards needed to point to the state survey requirements. General improvement standards, we needed to basically ensure that the city engineer had greater authority with regard to engineering plans, and also to expand the radius for pedestrian facilities to either connect or to provide a fee in lieu of connections. So that had previously been a half mile, and that was expanded to a 1 mile radius. Relative to alleys, the width was changed to 12 feet minimum. There is an authority summary, and it previously did not require a pre-application conference for preliminary plats and plat vacations. That was added in as a step required for those types of applications. Language was clarified to allow concurrent submittals of a plat and a site plan, so that people could basically have subsequent applications moving through an approval process together. And under enforcement, there were some parameters to address the authority for certificate of occupancy approvals. Changes that have occurred for Chapter 109. So the district approach that we've presented here, what you see on this table is an equivalency. So the proposed districts and the nomenclature for those are on the left side, and your current districts are on the right. Some of this is just combining some districts and addressing flexibility within districts. In other cases, it's a bigger change. For instance, commercial recreation was not really present in your existing code, but we found that was actually necessary, and in a lot of ways takes the place of a lot of the conservation properties. And so those were some adjustments that were made. We created a mixed commercial district that takes the place of your C3 and C4 districts currently. That becomes your C3 district. We combined your industrial districts. We combined a couple of districts relative to residential 2-family and special residential that allowed for multiple orientations of different multi-family development. That becomes moderate density and are combined into a single district, the R2. Instead of residential single family, you have a low density residential district. Residential estate basically stays the same. Agricultural preservation and ag are very comparable. So you'll see that the new menu of districts is what's used to then allocate uses and work our way through the various allowances. So these colors correspond with the zoning map. These definitions are in the Article 2 of Chapter 109 as purpose statements for each of the districts that are now present within the recommended code. I don't expect you to be able to read them on the screen. I couldn't do that either. And this is a small version of the zoning map that's been presented. A couple of things that you'll see on here that are new. Yes, the lakes are purple mauve colored now, but they do have blue lines through them. We know that that's a little bit disorienting, but anything that we colored that mauve color represents property owner association properties. So it's not only the lakes, it's also the golf courses and some other properties relative to that ownership. So it does look a little bit strange having, mauve running through it, but we think it represents things properly. The green dots that you see, and two things, the green dots that you see reflect trail side stop overlays. That was a specific use type that was introduced in the comprehensive plan to provide for more flexibility of uses within a certain proximity, in this case 700 foot radius of your actual trailhead locations, so that you have the ability for food trucks or small coffee shop type things to go up in those locations without having to necessarily come through and change the underlying zoning. The other changes that you see, there are some properties that are proposed to change to higher intensity zoning designations. Those are very specifically oriented to the locations on your future land use map in the comprehensive plan that call for destinations. So either community destinations or centers, those are those specific locations. We didn't overlay the actual, well, actually I think there was an exercise to overlay the actual map with those locations. It was tricky because a lot of these properties are not concentric circles extending from a point in time or a point on a map that was used by the folks that developed the comp plan to say generally this area needs to have some a center of activity and then expand out with less intense activities until it gets to single family areas. But that's what we've done in these locations, is to try and reflect as closely as possible using the actual geographies of platted properties to match what the intent of the future land use map in your comp plan is meant to do.
I was just gonna add the map that's in this, or on this slide right here. These,
It's a little old.
it's the old map. It's before we got all the comments with the June 30, July 3rd, and July 14th. So the one that you guys have in your packet that is attached to the zoning ordinance is the correct one. This one's just an exhibit as a part of the discussion.
There've been some adjustments. All right, so Article 3 within Chapter 109 is the uses, and particularly the use table. This has been reorganized. You'll currently have use tables in each of the districts that is not terribly different from this, but what you see here is all of the use types running down the left side of the screen and all of the menu of zoning districts across the top. Where a use is permitted, it's got a P in the field. Where it is permitted only by conditional use permit, it'll show up as a C. If it is a blank cell, that use is not allowed within the zoning district that's indicated. And if there are use-specific standards, there's this column that is actually hyperlinked, but you can see specific locations within the code that point to specific standards that need to be complied with relative to certain uses. Not every use has a use-specific standard, but some do, as you can see here. We also included parking ratios where they're applicable and in the same table, so that your use, you can basically tell anywhere it's allowed, how it is permitted, and what the different standards are. Use-specific standards and development standards are a little bit different. Article 3 is use-specific standards. Article 4 is development standards. I mentioned the residential adjacency and distance from other particular types of uses. Other use-specific standard examples include hours of operation, additional screening, things that may be applicable to just specific uses. Then the development standards are more general. This applies to any type of development within the city and wherever these things are applicable. Not everything's going to be in steep slopes, but the sign regulations are here, those architectural design standards are here, the lighting and landscaping and parking requirements are here. So this is where the general requirements for all development occurs. Retaining walls, I mentioned, was taking on its own division or section within the Article 4 development standards. So what we did was basically choose the higher standard that's currently in place, whereby an engineering design is required for anything that is 4 feet tall from natural grade to the top of the wall or higher. That's got to be an engineered or engineering approved design for a retaining wall. Others do not. So that was an attempt to streamline those. I mentioned the outdoor lighting, trying to ensure that light pollution and light trespass is contained or eliminated where possible. Just providing best practices and some examples of the type of fixtures that can be acceptable under the new regulations. Architectural design, I mentioned these apply to non-residential, mixed use, and multifamily developments. What we're wanting to do here is just establish and promote the character of development within the city and express that through various elements of the architectural design. Signs, key here is to ensure content neutrality and compliance with the First Amendment that been Supreme Court cases. Since your current codes were adopted that apply specifically to signage, we needed to make sure that that was in place. And also, don't know, but we've also got temporary signage is addressed in here as well and updated. Steep slopes, this is really taking anything from flat to 55% slope or greater and determining how much of the site can be developed based upon the steepness of the site. And the majority of this is intended to address erosion control and stormwater issues. We obviously don't want buildings falling off the side of hillsides, but it's also helping to keep in place the vegetation that's necessary to stabilize your steep slopes. Procedures. The procedures section of 109 in this case it includes an authorities table. This identifies the type of application. All of these are zoning related applications. Whether or not a pre-application conference is necessary, what, if any, notice is required, and then who has approval authority over that type of action. So the R's are for review, the D's are decisions, and A's are appeals. You'll see that a whole lot of things appeal to the City Council. That was another legislative change in the state in this past session, whereby if there is an appeal of any action taken relative to development, it goes to the City Council. So if the applicant currently, well, I guess before this goes into place was August
5th.
August 4th or 5th.
Yeah, this is part of the Act 591.
Yeah.
So regardless of when you guys vote on this, that will
This is
take
going to
effect
start
much sooner.
happening regardless.
That was not popular with the planning commission.
No, it wasn't. So that's something new. And you will also notice, let's see, I think, okay, here, site plans. So under Chapter 107 currently, you have a section called large-scale developments. We have eliminated large-scale developments, basically renamed them site plans, moved them over to Chapter 109. Site plan approval is required for new construction or buildings that are increasing by 10% or 2,500 square feet, whichever is less, or expanding parking lots or impervious surfaces in the same fashion. New construction within an approved planned zoning district is also required to go through a site plan approval. The various components, depending upon the application, it will likely include a parking plan, landscape lighting, facade, and steep slopes. All of that will need to be packaged as part of the application. The way that we've structured the approval process is that site plans will be approved administratively by staff when they are determined to comply with all of the requirements of the code, unless it is a planned zoning district, an industrial use, or a conditional use. And then those move forward to planning commission approval, or in some cases all the way up to city council. So based upon that table. So this is where the flexibility and increased authority for staff is baked in. And then the development standards and the site-specific or the use-specific standards are those guardrails that we've created so that staff has necessary guidance to make approvals that are consistent and uniform. So since we've gone through all of these conversations, from June 30th to present, we've also made some other adjustments. And these have already been considered and are part of the recommendation from the Planning Commission to you. 40 and 30% cap on residential uses in any single development. So what we wanted to do in C1 and C2 districts, there was a concern that with residential uses being permitted by right, it could be that a property within either a C2 or a C1 district developed solely as residential. And those are locations that are really intended to be higher intensity developments, either mixed use or commercial. So this kind of forces the issue and ensures that the entirety of those sites will not develop as residential. On the use table, we moved emergency and rehabilitative housing to a conditional use in the C1 district. Indoor entertainment and amusement venue is now a conditional use in the C1 district. Private parks and recreational facilities are permitted in the NP district. Cemetery is permitted in the C1 district and conditional in residential zones. So those were some adjustments that were made, mostly because we realized that we missed something or that something just didn't make sense without making a slight tweak. On the use-specific standards, we set some size limitations on taverns and bars. Outdoor mobile or temporary vending is now allowed on vacant or undeveloped property. It previously was not allowed to be developed on those parcels. It was intended to be like in the parking lot of something that's already been developed, for instance. But we realized that there are plenty of opportunities where that might be the thing that is sort of an initial use, and maybe it's sort of the thing that starts activity happening on a particular location and can build into a brick and mortar type development. Dimensional regulations. This is something that we recognize. Electric meters are prohibited along the front plane of residential buildings. There's been some discussion about this and whether or not that is enough of a description to ensure that the front of, not only the facade, the actual building wall of residential structures, but also basically the front yard is not a location where we really want to see the electric meters. So I think we might have additional conversation about that. We may bring you another recommendation for a slight amendment here, but right now, front plane of residential buildings is what's referenced. Bicycle parking was addressed and updated to a minimum of 2 spaces. Temporary signs, we went back and did a little bit more work on that to make sure that they were actually temporary and not allowed by right for more than a year. So there's some additional restrictions. 4 signs per permit, 4 permits per year, 30-day max. So basically, a temporary sign installation can be allowed for up to 120 days, but no longer than that. Beyond that 120 days, it's kind of Did you want to?
I just wanted to expand that because probably the people sitting around that table get a lot of sign discussions. Yes, that was one of the changes we made just between the 6:30, 7:3, and 7:14 meeting. But just as a whole, this project, she's mentioned it. Yes, we've beefed up or we've changed our sign requirements quite a bit. And I think one of those is alleviating, property owners of our zoning code as current. Currently, if you're zoned as R1 single family, or anything that's non-resident, or anything that is residential, you're not allowed to have a permanent sign. And so I know that causes, at least in our office and probably your guys' ears, a lot of conversation. It's, I want my sign, I want my permanent sign. City staff will let me have it, well, because the zoning map and zoning code says I can't. This new code will, instead of zoning, it will look at current land use. So even if the map has a property zoned as R1, low density residential, if it is a pre-existing and non-conforming, legal non-conforming use that is not a single-family home, then they are entitled to a sign, a permanent sign, so long as it meets the requirements of everyone else has to follow for permanent signage. Temporary signs as well. We didn't actually even put land use in that. It's just property owners, period. Everyone gets the same rules. So it's now spread more evenly instead of by zoning district. It's just everybody has to follow the exact same temporary sign, and then land use will dictate the permanent signage now.
Awesome.
So definitely alleviated some. I think that's the goal, is to give more signage rights to a degree. So.
But I would add back to one thing that you talked about. POA covenants are highly restrictive of signs in residential areas, to the extent that if it's not a real estate sign, I'm not even sure you can have any. Vote for John Doe for dog kid, nothing. But they don't enforce that. But the private restrictions on signs are far beyond anything the government could ever do constitutionally, so anyway, I'll just say that.
So that's a fallback.
Yeah, it's very beneficial for us, but they don't do anything so about it.
So the reference to village wastewater standards, in your current regulations, those standards are basically repeated in Chapter 107. And what we're wanting to do here, and what we've done with this amendment, is move them to adopted by reference. So at one of the appendices that's proposed is referencing and would include the village wastewater standards, so that you don't have to have them repeated within the code document itself. Grading, erosion control, stormwater pollution prevention. In this case, natural vegetation and tree canopy preservation requirements are added for lots that are used as septic fields. Right now, that's not applicable, but we want to make sure that throughout the village, throughout the city, we've got standards that are applicable to all lots uniformly. Looking at those lots that are used as septic fields, we believe that you can still comply with those vegetation and canopy preservation requirements within the mandatory setbacks. So along the perimeter of those lots, which is basically where you would have the opportunity to preserve vegetation, you would be able to use that to comply with this requirement. Site plan procedures. It was updated and recommended by the Planning Commission that notice be provided by certified mail to property owners within 200 feet for site plans. That would be site plans that come through an administrative process or one that proceeds on to an elected or appointed body for approval. And that is more notice than people typically get. So it's a little bit of a belt and suspenders type of approach, but the Planning Commission felt strongly that that was something that they wanted to see. And obviously, it's your prerogative if you feel like that's the way you want to approach that and move it forward. So all that to say, we're here at phase 4 of the process, and the next step is adoption. So we're here for discussion and questions so that you all feel comfortable when it gets to that point, and this is put in front of you as an actual item for adoption, which we think will start next week.
So we're at a break time now for discussion.
Yes, sir.
I've had some requests from council about having a restroom break.
This is a great time to do
Might be a
that.
good time to do that.
Think of all your questions while we break.
Have a snack.
That's a good idea.
I gotta go on the
Maybe
list.
not eat inside.
Incorporated private
This is, I think this breaks records here for a work session.
Yeah, we should.
Well, because the city,
I couldn't wait.
those private regulations change of
I'm sure everybody understands.
the soup, the wastewater, that's what I'm talking about. They can change abstractly and could potentially, and I think there've been some cases about due process or whether it's evading the legislative process of the city. I haven't done the research, it's just something that sticks in the back of my head, that flagged up when.
We should be done now. Any difference as to whether it's, is that Friday, is it Friday?
Yes, I think if you adopt the standards
11 plus
and they
5.
match, I'm not concerned. 'Cause, I mean, if you're talking about, I don't even know what type of standards we're talking about. We're talking about the size of the pipe.
July.
You know, you've got to have a tank.
I'm gonna give it to you if it's not.
I would feel a lot more comfortable with that rather than
And I'll tell you
saying,
what.
whatever rules Village Wastewater comes up with, you got to follow.
So it's gonna be out the door.
That could be quite arbitrary.
Isn't that interesting? I thought
This was planning commission's copy on
That's a
why,
good idea,
would you say it was the other way? Is that what he's saying? The other way?
Okay.
I'm saying they ought to be
That's good. I
specific
know
and
that's
just
a lot.
incorporated by
And that's what
reference.
staff
Yeah,
proposed.
that's the only other thing
Yeah.
They wanted to change it, that's why we changed it.
I
So,
don't recommend, that's a legal problem.
Okay.
Good idea.
but I.
What's it called?
Shay?
Before the meeting even
And I
started.
saw that,
Shade.
and I thought I was
I
going
was
to let
looking
it
for a good
slide
time to
because I
break,
thought,
because I
we were
remember
talking about a
man, I
technical.
let it go too
Then I
long.
thought, no.
I didn't even make it. I had to go out earlier.
Let's just say, well, there's a reason why we just don't adopt the primary covenants of Bella Vista as the development requirements of the city. They could require something that we may not be exactly. So, I mean, again, we're talking about wastewater, we're talking about technical, engineering, water flow pressures and all, I don't know.
Install high PFA, like that.
Yeah.
That's really what that is.
But could we not also dictate to them how they need to do it?
That was,
In other words, if we said, here are the standards, then that's how they've got to install.
yeah, and that was, it was kind of like an actual, like a medium, like, franchise issues getting the building and stuff. I'm not looking to get one place for the village, so okay, we'll oversee it all then. And we will just follow that, and staff can come in and say, actually, you need to follow your own, because now on our street, the equipment's hitting stuff. And that's awesome. Yeah.
I think we need to.
But we, okay, that was PC.
Yeah, I'd say usually just bring that up as they recommend.
Well, and I can discuss with them the legal challenges, and after I do some more research on it. But I just, that there are issues with this wholesale adopting a private set of rules.
Yeah, I feel like they recommended plan list.
The recommended plan list.
Of species or tree species.
Oh, yeah, I think that's okay, as long as there's a rational basis for it, I think that clearly is.
They built it that, so we were thinking about the same.
No, when I say legal and whether they'll go for it, that's two different things.
That was one thing that we felt like appendix would be easier to make adjustments.
Sure.
Arborist recommendation or tree, like disease.
I have to admit, I may come in with some questions, but I've been remarkably surprised at how amenable the planning commission and the council is to
There's some people that are like,
property restricted stuff. You know, we're not, this is a very, very,
No, I use, well, I do have a bright flashlight that I bring just in case, but normally it's like a dim light. Just
down there fishing for which fish.
They do anything. Especially all these rules I contractually agree.
Late at night? Or from like, from like now until 11?
I will deal with the legal side, on the legal side of the question. I feel better.
Sometimes I'll put a line out for catfish, but those aren't my favorite to catch.
Were they? Well, what's it to? I think they're going to have to comply with it. I don't know that they could claim an exemption.
I'm a new person, so my question is,
I can't believe this many people are still here.
Hard as a volume.
I guess, yeah, they're mostly just
So you can't be past the front, we'll define the front plane of the house. We've defined the front plane of the house. We have an ordinance that talks about you.
Maybe he's a children like down here, but he's not.
We've worked through
guy, so
if
like.
we could mirror something like that. What if we just said that electric meters have to be connected to the structure directly? With, you know, no further away than 1 foot. You know, there's something like, I mean, just to get at it.
They want negative.
Yeah,
He said the
this is started, this is something new.
Make it work for me.
I said Mike.
But, I mean, yeah, you got
It's easy trails.
So, where'd you stay?
But they can do that now.
All over.
You did?
We flew to Seattle, they drove up to the coast right away.
But maybe they have to go
We're in the
inside
Pacific, we
street,
stayed
take
at
a loop,
the
or normally
Clear
they
Rock
can
Lodge.
just get all those things done.
Up by like Ruby Beach and Yellow Beach, and so we visited like the rainforest and Olympic National Park. And then we
Yeah,
went
I
to
think
like
let's add that to the
Tide,
list of
we
things.
crossed all the sea
But also, hey Taylor, remember when we, maybe you don't remember, we adopted an
and then,
ordinance
so
in the
yeah,
city
did
that
rainforest
talks
and all
about
that, and then
front
up
lane
to,
houses that relates to storage.
Corangeles, which is one of the major places where people
Find the
stay.
front plane of the house.
And
I was wondering whether that would be a good definition of what we're talking about with the electric meters.
Did you see
Find
Norfolk?
that?
Yes, we saw orcas.
But I don't know that they're
Like the
aggressive.
pod was working
We'll tell you the site. My neighbor has one that they go
and so we saw the whole thing up to the
behind the front of the house, but it's still a house.
Wow.
Which I feel
And
like
then on the
is
way back, we saw some too.
It says that.
I got to ride the free willy boat before. The one that was in the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I rode that and I went to watch one of the pretty cool. But they weren't killing anything.
No, that's what was exciting. Like, it's great to see it, but then we saw them and they got, you know, more frenzied, and then they made the
So we need to talk, we need to add that to our list of
And then, yeah, from there, like,
No, I was just.
1 hour 13 now officially.
Oh, wow.
Starting to feel like a firefighter.
You know, next week will go fast though. Next week will be like
Okay, if I stand behind my chair.
a blur because we don't have,
we'll take those off.
if these go off, we don't have any presentations. We do have citizen comment, but that usually, you never know.
Well, the last one we had a lot, so this one we should have.
We should probably have lots, yes. I missed the last meeting, so I didn't get all that. I just wrote the minutes up for it.
Quite a
But,
few.
yeah, there was the herbicide, pesticide thing.
Yes, two,
They said he
and
wanted
then
to talk
support
about
for,
dinner next
Big
time.
thing of,
I ate dinner.
support for all of
at least that was more of a positive thing, yeah.
I have to my family to go, just keep going, just eat that way.
Yeah.
I'll see you later.
Go on without me.
It's fine. Walk past my body.
I did the same, Wendy.
Just
eat, please eat dinner.
He's like, no, we're halfway done. Just. Tell my children about my face, memories.
Frosty accidentally made a good call.
This is a great call, Frosty's place.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we come back to order? And you left off with questions, I guess?
It's kind of open. We've had a few conversations. I'm sure you guys have thought about this just a little bit, but we're open to questions and any further adjustments that you feel may be necessary before this comes before you for action.
One of the questions I had is you mentioned like typos or, the more we sat with it, we realized some of the houses weren't working.
Every time we look at it, this is, 400 pages of content. So we'll continue to do that. I mean, we look at this like every day as we come up with other things that, specific recommendations for adjustments. And so I guarantee that there may be some additional formatting or typo type things that come forward. And I will also say, whenever we work with the community to do this substantial of an overhaul of their development regulations, I want to set the expectation that in 6 months, you're probably going to see the need for some other adjustments. As you get into administering this new code and see how it works with different types of applications and circumstances, we are 100% sure that this is not 100% going to do everything that you want. Because every piece of property is different, every application is different, and we think we've caught a vast majority of things that you all want to see happening and adjusted within your regulations. But there may be typos, there may be dimensional things that just don't seem to be working, whether it's easement widths or setbacks or things like that. We want you to keep a log of those. I'm sure that Taylor and her team have a log of those because they had one for us when we walked in the door in October of 23. That's the kind of thing that we expect and would recommend that you work on at that 6-month point, and then have an annual housekeeping type process where you're really looking at your codes on a regular basis. And one trigger is however many times you're seeing repeat variances for the same type of application. If you see that a lot and those variances are always being approved, then codify that change so that it's not something that causes someone to have to jump through hoops in order to get an easy answer because they know that the city's going to approve it because it makes sense. Things that make sense should be codified and be easy for people to accomplish. So that's just a preface to other questions.
We will try to get everything straight, but I want you to know, if we found some typos, true typos or number transpositions, even after we adopt it, we have an ordinance that allows us to just fix that without having to come back to you. So we're going to try and avoid all that, but anyway.
So the nature of my question was more about your review process and that continuous improvement process, right? That's my hesitation is, I know it's been almost a month since the first draft was published, but that is pretty quick. That's a really thick book. I don't know that any of us are professional real estate agents or developers, so this is not, our learning curve is a little more intense, and so that's my hesitation. Is just knowing that there's actually no amount of time we could spend on it for it to be perfect. And so wanting to hear, what does that look like, right? Once we realize there are still additional imperfections, what's that process look like? What's the best practice? So I appreciate you sharing that. And I was curious, did you, obviously within your firm, I'm sure multiple people have looked at this, but was part of your process having people outside of your firm or having professionals within this community specifically look at it and give notes? Has that been part of your process?
So exactly, that's a great question because I didn't really explain that as we talked about process. We developed this code in sections, so there was like the districts and uses, and then we packaged that up, we sent it to staff, they did a review, they sent us edits, we had meetings and conversations, and worked through changes, revisions based upon just an iterative process for both chapters and for the map, so that we were always kind of in that circular process of revision and review. I know staff also had some conversations with other folks, stakeholders within the community as they were approaching different topics or questions. And so your staff's got the best knowledge about how these things work and what it means when things hit the ground. So we have taken quite a lot of comfort in the fact that they are super good at what they do, and we've been able to lean on them a bit, but we've also had multiple people within our team looking at, and we have a quality review process within the company that also does the same type of review and revision process.
Thank you. Sure. Kind of piggybacking on that, what did the coordination process look like for bringing in our stakeholders and the developer and their opinions to let them have a chance to, what did that look like?
Well, in the beginning, it was during phase one when we had the stakeholder engagement. That was just during the public comment period. We had the in-person interviews. They were each identified and grouped per external and internal group. So the developer, the POA, all of them, the utilities, that's what I was talking about earlier when I first got up. But we had around 30, I think, of those be interviewed. We interviewed them over 3 days, I think, almost all day, literally, interviewing them all the issues and red tape they were running into with our current code. But after we got through phase two, so literally about a year ago, around July of 2024, we started soliciting comments on the draft. So the developer and the POAs and the larger landowners, we started sending and meeting for comments as well as internal staff review. So it's literally been a year now of soliciting comments.
And all the drafts were posted to the website so that people had access to the works in progress as we moved through the different versions of the chapters.
How, I guess, communicated was that? I don't remember a lot of communication maybe on my behalf of receiving hey, there's a new draft. Of course, it's really hard for me to sludge through it and read it. Sure. But for people who are like the developer or other stakeholders, how much time do they have to kind of look through different drafts and then opine before a new draft would be given to them?
It would depend on what stage we're at.
Yeah. How many of their inputs and changes have actually impacted the document that we're looking at, I guess?
Since over the last 12 months, I would say quite a bit. We did what we could within the adopted land use plan. If future land use plan said absolutely not, or comp plan said absolutely, those are the things that we probably couldn't write off. But sign cluttering, I know the POA. I got several comments from the POA on sign clutter. They wanted that for that's the planning best practice term for it, but multiple signs and off-site signs allowed throughout the city to point towards one business. Sign clutter is typically what planners call it. It's not best practice to have that. So that is one we could not accommodate. It's just not best practice now. You guys choose to do that. The city's never allowed the off-site signage. We've always allowed just one, and it must be on-site to prevent the multitude of a thoroughfare just being littered in permanent signs, to protect our our scape of Bella Vista, our natural view of Bella Vista. However, if their comments were aligned with the comp plan, they were addressed. And I couldn't even give a number as to how many of those were addressed.
Thank you.
Are off-site signs permitted in any way?
No. Nope. Since I'm aware of, since Bella Vista's adopted a sign code, we've never allowed offsite. They've always been in the prohibited section.
That should be governed by conditional use.
No. We wouldn't review a sign permit through a CUP. They would have to get a variance from the BZA.
Or a variance.
Yeah. But yeah, they can seek that. If they have a hardship, they're more than welcome to apply for BZA.
Well, that still would be available to
Yes.
an applicant.
Correct, if you guys choose to keep that off-site signage requirement. That's just the one that comes to my mind, is one that I just, explained apologetically. I just can't, just because the POA asked me to make these legal, I can't just do that. I have to have justification, best practice, and adopted policy, something to do that, especially since we've never done it before. But if their comments, like I said, like if they said, hey, this piece of land, you guys zoned it as R1, residential, or conservation in 2009, it's been existing, it has surrounding land use, or it's within a node, we analyzed that and addressed it and either gave it commercial recreation, which is what's intended for them, or if it was another developer that says, hey, this is right smack in the middle of the community destination center, it shouldn't be R1. Then we said, okay, well, we'll get together and we'll see what can't takers.
When we see this Monday, will staff be asking for third and final?
Nope.
Okay.
We
So we're-
fully expected you guys to read this 3 times.
Thank you.
And nobody's trying to rush this through.
Just making sure. I was don't surprise me,
Yeah. Yeah, we've been very transparent about that. The planning commission and everyone that's been asking us, been eager for this, like this could go till December, and staff is fully prepared for that, so.
We're just going to lie. Appreciate that. Thank you. Love that. Thank you.
The zoning map, how are we addressing the informing of neighbors about changes where we're not categorically changing something, we're making a zone in an area based on the comprehensive plan for development to occur, commercial usually, or that type of thing? Are we sending any notices out at all?
We are meeting state law. We are meeting the state law requirement that we publish to the Weekly Vista, which I have done and she has done. It's been published in there twice to warn the public that we were talking about it at the public hearing on July 14th, which has already passed, and then Wanda published a notice notifying the public that you all may talk about it on the 28th here coming up. On top of that, it's been a lot of just website noticing, like we've been updating that, as well as like we've been talking about the stakeholder engagement. Our current code does not require us to notify property owners by certified mail or anything like that. It's typically done via public notice in the newspaper. So we complied with that and then updated our public hearing website as well as an additional step for transparency as well. But we've complied with the local and state requirements on that.
Will some of these group zonings like this result in a Dollar General situation developing anywhere? I'm talking about.
Yeah, Larry, it's not a matter of us rezoning things from what they are. This is a whole new zoning concept for the entire city. It affects every citizen. And so the law says, okay, well, put your notices in the paper, let people know, do all that. Could potential uses change in there? Of course they could.
But are we doing something here that creates like activity nodes, if you will, from the comprehensive plan?
Yes.
By applying the new zoning districts.
Right. By using our new zoning district categories to fit in there. But will that result in any way in one of those coming up as a surprise Dollar General situation that we experienced a couple of years ago?
Well, nothing should be a surprise because the use table will identify exactly which zoning districts would support a small-scale commercial activity such as a Dollar General or a small box type development. That's not different than what today you have at your disposal, which is a zoning map and a list of permitted uses. Right. So I think there is no guarantee that a controversial development action would come before the city. In fact, you can probably guarantee that it will. It's just, it may not happen in the same place, and it may not happen with the same circumstances, but that's the nature of development and utilizing these types of tools to control private development.
And the example you're giving isn't really applicable to what we're talking about here. This is following the future land use plan that, went through public engagement and that you guys adopted and said, staff, we want this. That's what this is. That application you were talking about was a PZD, which could happen anywhere at any time, not what we are proposing to you guys. Someone could take an R1 residential lot tomorrow and submit a PZD to me and say, I would like to design a small scale retail.
And they get sued immediately.
Anyway.
And it's not gonna happen, so this is,
Because of the covenant.
because this is the point that we somewhat started with, and I mentioned at the planning commission. People are concerned that the city is going to allow things in areas where their covenants protect and say it cannot happen. And we are not doing that.
Exactly right.
And
Excuse me for my frustration, but this is about the 1,000th time over 9 years I've said that, so anyway.
And anyone has the right to request a PZD at any time for any, any master planned development, so, anywhere within our city limits.
As changes are made, since it sounds like that's happening almost hourly, what's the best way for us to see that from now till December?
We have a red line document.
Do we all have a link to that? And
Yeah, I can share it with you. It's not
think-
published in this, but it's in the
Right.
planning commission packet that shows every change that was made during the public hearing.
So when, you'll have first reading on this Monday. Like any other ordinance, if it's going to change from what it says, it's going to have to be through an amendment process. And so that's only can be amended through you all.
Yeah, what
So
presents-
any
what-
changes after the first reading are going to have to come to you before they are incorporated.
We'll
Unless it's a
present to you on
non-majority.
Monday the act of what was
Typos.
presented
yeah.
and
No
recommended by
change,
the
really.
planning commission, because that's what was advanced.
Explain, I think Dawn was being a little, and just to be a little more technical, I know she's in like public engagement mode, but just to be a little bit more technical in when she was saying the typos, they weren't really typos. It was more like we said 2 here, 4 here, so we needed to make them match. Like they were conflicting.
That's right.
And then all of the other changes were requested from the planning commission during 6:30 and 7:30. We weren't sitting there making last minute changes or anything like that. I just want to make sure we're very transparent on that. If it was staff's end, it was either a conflicting issue, the code conflicted with itself, or it was a direct response or request from the planning commission. But at this point forward, there will be no more staff amendments. It'll only be through you via amendments, so.
That's helpful.
Now,
So we'll come up with them.
I anticipate that we're going to come to you with some staff recommended amendments
Okay, perfect.
that would incorporate some things, and maybe some things we've already discussed. And of course, you'll have a full opportunity to debate and discuss that, whether you want to edit, change it, or whatever. But you'll have your baseline, and then you will be in charge of any modifications from first reading forward. We said December, so first reading in July, second reading in August, third reading in September, and that is unless you decide to table it. And then
60 days.
60 days after it's adopted, it becomes effective. So that's October, November. That's if you did 3 readings, 3 meetings in a row, and then waited for the full time to adopt, which we don't anticipate any emergencies being declared or expedited consideration. So, you always could table it for another month if you feel like you need to. You have that full authority. So. No one's trying to put the pedal to the metal on this.
So we don't have to walk out of here right now.
No,
Lydia.
like, oh my God, I'm going to decide on this by Monday.
We have 2 more
You
meetings
got
just
plenty
like
of
this
time.
in the consecutive months where we could ask a ton more questions.
Yes.
Okay.
I expected this to be more just like here's what's happened over the last 2.5 years, and then month 2, you guys come back with actual discussion. points,
Beautiful.
things like that.
I love that plan.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for your time. Yep.
So, I think what Don made a good point is this isn't written in cement. And I have noticed what's so interesting about this area is you always notice what used to be different by actual practice.
Yes.
The planning commission keeps having the same thing happen over and over and go, hey, maybe there's something wrong with this section, And so even if there's things we get wrong, I think we'll know that we'll be able to make it a little better. But this is going to be fantastically better than what we had. And the challenge for city council and for me is that we just had this created by people with way more expertise than us. And then our inside planning department worked on it, which also has way more expertise. You know, one of the interesting things about being on city council is you go from issue to issue, and after a while you think, well, you know, what am I supposed to be an expert in everything? It's unbelievable the different areas you cover. You know, and some of them you're maybe better at than others, but that's part of the fun, right? So.
Do you need to plug back in on?
I don't know that we,
Need any more exhibits for your stuff?
I don't think so. We just have a couple little things, but
We'll just unplug them.
Oh, I see, plug in for the next.
yeah. thank
Okay,
you.
so let's say that was B and C. We did B and E. We have F, which is approving the mayor's appointment of Eric Bartel to the Active Transportation Advisory Board position 1 to complete an unexpired term which ends March 1, 2027 due to vacancy. And his resume is attached. And Eric Bartel's actually is here.
Still? This is why I call
I just guaranteed you victory.
So,
Dedication.
You'll have to come next month.
I assume, could we put that on consent agenda?
consent agenda.
you want to? Okay.
Easy peasy on that one.
Should we want to say something if he sat here this
For
long?
sure.
Yeah. Eric, how many words of wisdom for us?
No.
Thank you.
It's so late. I'm delirious.
Transport active.
What happened to?
Only thing in the consent agenda will be.
Yeah, the minutes and this.
Oh, yeah, sir. Why is there nothing?
Oh, the vacancy.
Taylor, who was it that?
Megan, Amy. Yeah, Amy Darnapan had to resign due to personal reasons, could not make the meetings work anymore with her personal life.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. We have a few other things on discussion items. One is implementing a business license for Bella Vista businesses. And this is something that's come up that people feel might be a good idea, and we weren't to the point of even having an ordinance. I just wanted to put it on for discussion. And Taylor, I think you're going to say a few words about this.
Well, just from a staff perspective, it seems to be a recurring topic with planning, building, engineering, and then some other, like fire, as in the fire inspectors who do the annual inspections, which Chief, you're more than welcome to hop up here too.
That's a plus.
Yeah, it's just everything we keep coming to, whereas businesses moving or moving into structures that haven't been inspected for life, health, and safety. They haven't had an occupancy from fire. They haven't checked their zoning or land use, and then we have to come in on the back end and say, well, it's actually not zoned for that. A lot of the issues that we're running in that are causing red tape would be much easier to be addressed on the front end through a business license. It would save headache for the property owner and then for staff. So that way we can maybe give an actual chain flow of operations for not only the applicant, but also staff. So that way we can make sure life, health, safety, and zoning issues are met before a new business opens.
So you're talking about just brick and mortar businesses, not like someone's home business?
No, I'm not talking about home occupations.
You could draft it, it's how you draft
Okay.
your ordinance,
Yeah.
what you want to require. out of it.
For example, Bentonville excludes home occupations that just work from their laptops or phones at home.
Okay.
What about short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals will not be included either. I wouldn't think. I don't venture that as a, no.
So they're not currently required to get a business license?
No, we don't have one right now. We're the only city in the top 5 that doesn't require one.
It is,
Require a license
it is a
for
very useful
Business
tool
licenses.
to gain enforcement and enforcement of our requirements, because they either can't be granted a business license and then you can take action on that, or you could suspend a business license or potentially revoke one if you had chronic violations. So it is a very useful tool on the front end to try to get compliance. It's also a useful tool as the business continues. You know, if they become a problem, we don't anticipate that, but it is an awful useful tool that we just don't have that most everybody else does.
Data collection, knowing where the businesses are. Just-
Do we issue liquor licenses?
No.
No.
No, we discussed, if you recall that a couple of months ago, we discussed the possibility of that. And the city could adopt a process, a licensing mechanism, but
And it'd make
we have
about
not
as much
done.
money as tornado sirens cost for anyone still.
So,
One more question. For home businesses, again, I'm so sorry, that might operate out of like a shed. I know businesses that have clientele come to like a dwelling, or not an ADU, but like a shed-like apparatus, and money's exchanged there. Would those be under this, or would that be
Could be.
separate?
could be.
Because it's not like
To
a
be-
CPA.
To be seen as a home occupation, it must happen within the dwelling.
At the
of
board.
Less than 25% of the GFA.
Okay,
Of the primary principal dwelling unit.
Okay.
So,
so it's operated out of, okay.
If you're like a makeup shed and I'm selling Avon,
Yeah.
need a business license.
Or firearms. We
Yes.
actually we've had, I think, haven't we had somebody with an accessory unit that was used to
A shed.
sell firearms, or tried to, they were getting a federal permit, maybe, I don't recall. But, yeah, there's a little retail going on that's
Would they have
probably
to-
not allowed.
Would you have to renew your business license every year, like a short-term rental
It
permit?
would require an annual renewal. Again, it depends on what you write.
Yeah.
You determine how it would be done.
Because somewhere like, Walgreens, in their capacity of like funds, $200 wouldn't be nothing, where a home business would be, that could be detrimental to their income. Maybe we could do a sliding scale or something,
Right.
if we do this.
There's probably some good models already existing.
Because one of the problems I have with that, the way that short-term rental permit is now, is the owners don't get a notice from the city until it's already expired. And if they renew it early, say it's due in August and I renew it in July, they lose a month then, because their next one is expired in July, and I just think that's unfair. I'll put it on the agenda for next month, but,
That's good input. Yeah.
so I'd like.
If we have time, we will try and do an expiring notice. But whenever we have 30 to 40 expire in 1 week, sometimes that's not possible, and they just get it on the Friday after it expires.
You're making an assumption again about how we structure it. Some cities will have one that are good for the calendar year. So if they all come due at the end of the year, and then everyone, has to renew it to be in business come January 1. Some may do it on a rolling basis and say they're good for 12 months. The ones that I've read, if you get it mid-year, sometime after a certain date, you pay 50% for the first year, and then, you're up for a full renewal. Again, that gets into the staff needs, because if everything came due at the end of the year, now we're going to have everybody trying to get a business license December 25th, or, the last week of December, so that could create a backlog for the staff, and there are a lot of considerations, I'll be honest with you. It's not here's how you do it, and here's your choice. You really do have a lot of things you could do to tailor something to your community.
Yeah.
What they're bringing to you.
Yeah, anyway, we kind of just wanted to raise it and see what people thought, and we could put something together, But
I think it's needed. It's been discussed before and it's been kind of laid down, so.
Might help
Yeah.
us pre-plan.
before.
It would help us, what it's gonna help us with on the fire department side is when somebody leaves a business and moves somewhere else, we don't know for a long time unless they come unless we go and say, inspect that building, we find out they've moved. It'd be nice to be able to know where they moved to, so that way we could,
We have a ton of people and businesses contact us surprised that we don't require it,
yeah.
wanting to get one.
And we're growing, so it
Yeah.
makes more sense.
And there's other cities that require licenses for our businesses that operate here to operate there. And if we didn't,
Yeah.
so like Rogers, for example, they require business licenses from Bella Vista businesses to operate there. So because we don't require business licenses, so they are making a profit off of that.
Whereas if we required it, Rogers wouldn't be able to.
Correct.
I know it's so loose, but would the idea be that existing businesses would be able to have a grace period to obtain theirs, or would there be some sort of
You would have to adopt something that had a beginning date, or
Yeah.
it's structured into the ordinance about,
Perfect.
beginning January 1, blah, 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 whatever. So you got plenty of, you wouldn't just
Plenty of notice.
put it on the first day it's effective and
Beautiful. Okay.
So,
make them show up that day.
so the city probably doesn't have, owner information, for example, JJ's After Hours has an emergency.
Well, we don't know anybody to contact. We don't have the information.
So business license would help with that.
Absolutely.
Emergency services as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Steve, also for your input. Next one is status of the 2024 audit. Kim Hall left a few minutes ago, so she asked me to fill in for that. She didn't have the endurance of Eric Bartel. Anyway, she's been working hard on the audit with the auditors, and they have, she's actually solved a lot of the issues. They're pretty far along, and they have just today gave her an ending date of August 16th.
Exciting.
Yeah, and under our revenue bond, we needed to have it done by August 28th, so that's good. It looks like it'll be in time. So far, everything sounds pretty good with it. And the next item, I think, is yours, Jason, the virtual meeting change.
I'll be very quick. If you remember 2 or 3 months ago, I mentioned to you that the state had changed freedom of information laws. That in turn meant that a lot of what we had just adopted was going to have to be undone in terms of virtual assistance at meetings. And so before I just put a resolution on the agenda for you, I wanted to bring that back up again, saying it is my recommendation. In fact, since we can't do it, we need to make our rules comply. So my recommendation would be to basically put it back the way it was, which allowed for a governor's declaration of emergency, which is what the state law does. And before I just start doing that, I wanted to talk to you, make sure that's what you want to do.
We do.
So,
We want to comply with the law.
so I think I will
We can put it on the agenda.
get that done tomorrow and get it to you. if we
Okay,
get it
great.
Friday.
So it'll be on the agenda.
And is that something you would want on a consent agenda?
Consent.
Yes.
Okay,
We
great.
have to do it. It's not-
Consent, all right.
So I'll get that
So
to
we'll
you
have
tomorrow.
3 things on the consent agenda. Put it back on.
That's it.
I think that's it. I think we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you for your patience.
3 hours and 4
That's totally a record. for
3:05:41.
Is that thing still on?
Someone.